last, well, you all announced in the last public meeting, which I was not in attendance at, about the application for our Student Advisory Committee and student representatives that is now open. We have pushed out the information to a number of sources. The staff will be doing 2 selfie tours of district high schools, and we are working to hit every single high school in the district to make sure that we have representation, which is something that is very important to all of us. In order to do that, I need your help as well. So Paul's going to be passing out some packets of information that if you have a chance to drop these off at schools in your areas, or additional schools in all of your areas, that would be super helpful. We've put in a map, and you can see in your materials which schools we're asking individual members to hit. All you need to do is drop off the information and ask them to pass it to their students and pass it to the folks who are interested to get that information back out to their students as much as possible. So if you have any questions, let us know. If you can't make a drop for some reason, let us know. We'll try to do additional drops as needed. So each of the folders is the drop, right? So if you have more than one folder that is attached, that's more than one drop. But you'll see we've tried to make it fairly easy for each the folks to be able to make these drops. But again, please try to do so by the end of the spring break, which is next week, so that we can make sure that the students have time to consider their application, because there is an essay section, and we want to make sure that they have time to consider the application process. So thank you so much in advance for your help. We really, really do appreciate it.
So the schools that aren't here or already have represented,
they either will be hit by state board staff in terms of drop-off, or they already have representatives as well. We're also asking folks from the SBOE task force, as well as the student advisory committee, to make touches at schools as well for the student advisory committee. So everyone watching at home, hello. Please make sure that you pass the information as well, and we'll be tweeting out about it, of course. So thank you very much in advance. We really appreciate it.
And you want them out at the schools by when?
By the end of next week.
All right.
next week is the holiday.
Yep.
So realistically, it would be probably a good idea to get it to the students tomorrow.
If that is a possibility, that would be lovely. Some schools are doing in-service PD tomorrow, or in-school PD, DCPS, so it might be a good day to drop, and it might be a bad day to drop. Depends on the school.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda. So the first thing is to adopt this agenda. Let me just say, due to a failure of my thought process, we have an hour for the working group reports, which was not what was intended. So it should really be the working group reports until 5:30. If we need longer, we can take longer, and then go to the leadership report. And that way, we'll have both of those done potentially before the chancellor comes, or we'll have not so much to do after the fact. Apart from that, any other issues on the schedule? Okay. All right.
Can I move to make an adjustment? Is it possible to move the leadership report first? Perhaps moving the OSSE report up and the working, but move it second, perhaps by that point. We'll be here, and then the working groups report later. And the reason, just to be transparent, the reason is because I have to leave, and I know Representative Batula also has to leave, and so I would love to engage in a conversation around the leadership report, if possible. And I was just personally curious about the OSSE update.
Well, the OSSE update we can take whenever else is ready, but I don't know that. Are you ready, or you need Justin?
I would like to wait for Justin.
Yeah.
He's on his way.
Sure.
So let me just say this: the reason we scheduled that way is I think we want to have some, good discussion on the working group. So why not? And I don't know that, but we have a lot on the leadership. So why not? If you want to start on the leadership, what I would ask is if it's going to be long, then to move it. but let's, we
Oh,
have
yeah, I
15
don't-
minutes, you know, that's what it's said go.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
just-
don't know what's in it, but I just want to make sure I'm here for it. And
Okay.
I imagine the working group reports might run.
Alright, okay, so I'll do the leadership report first. And the main thing I want to report on is, as people know, at the budget hearing, the student advocate raised a number of issues around pay parity and the priority of that office. At that time, I said, and I've said since, to my knowledge, and I think to Marcus's, we had no understanding of those issues at all, other than that the advocate herself was involved in talks about raise. But since then, we had a call as soon as we could get people together, a meeting of the admin committee. So that would be Marcus, myself, the heads of the 3 offices, and Karen, and I want to say it was Rick, and Emily. And I want to say thanks to Karen for coming. I think it was Zachary's idea, if I'm not mistaken, to sort of create that have sort of former leadership in this group, in the admin committee. It was terrific to have that historical memory there. So thanks, Karen, for coming, and Zachary for having that idea. Anyway, what I'll say is in that session, which went for quite a long time, we sort of worked out key pieces of the budget so that some corrections could be filed, I believe, the very next day. And those included the raise for the advocate and a substantial down payment on some of the parity issues coming out of the state board budget for next year. There's going to be, we're going to meet again next week to further talk about how we go, partly finish up the budget, and we talk a lot about budget advocacy and how we're going to work together to promote the budgets of all the different offices. And that would, yeah.
Quick question. When you say that a new budget items were submitted the very next day, what does that mean? Because we always voted on a budget.
Yeah, I'll let
And
John
we voted on changes to budget.
Yeah, I'll let John Paul talk. It was a correction of some sort.
Correct.
It's a technical correction.
So yeah, so the information that was submitted was a technical correction from the CFO. What happened was in the difference, or in the 2 budgets that the agency has to go through each year, the mark and the need creations to meet the mayor's mark. When that budget was put back into the mayor's budget prior to submission to the council, it was put into the wrong accounts. And part of that is because when we have adopted a budget, we for the past couple of years have adopted a top line budget number, and then just used our previous year's lines, which are things like professional services, office supplies, those types of things. We've just used what has been in our previous year's budget, and we've allowed the CFO's office to really make those decisions on exactly where the funds go. So when they put the funds back into the budget, between the mark and the need for appropriations, it was put into almost entirely into the state board's budget, which made it look like the ombudsman and student advocates' budgets were significantly reduced, which was not the intention. So this really was a restoration of those funds back to what the intention of the board was in July in the vote. And so I'm happy to send over the budget code information to all of the board members. I believe the admin committee has it as well, but I'm happy to send that along. The underlying budget number does not change. It's the same number that was approved by the board in July of last year. Jack, does that answer your
Okay, that's
question?
helpful. I just want to make sure that we all have, yes, but I want to make sure we all have that information. We always send all of that information to all board members, so whether you want it or not, you've gotten it in the past. And so everyone who's been on the board for 4 or more years has 4 years of knowledge. Everyone who's been on the board 2 or more years has 2 years of knowledge. That should just be shared.
Agreed. I will send it right now.
So then we're having, the admin group will get together again next Thursday. We're going to sort of, as I said, try to work on the budget advocacy piece, which I also hope is going to engage everybody at some point, but we want to sort of figure that out across these offices. And then what we wanted to do, and this will really amount to the launch of it, is to have that admin committee with these 3 offices meeting on a regular basis, at least once a month. I mean, I think maybe starting out we might meet more often just to sort of get people on the same page. I'll just say for me, and then I'll give it to Marcus. And the way I think about these offices is we are in a city where there is a very large education establishment, and it's very centralized. It's all under the mayor, as we know. That's not the same everywhere. And there are 3 independent education agencies in the city, 3 independent education operations. There's the State Board of Ed, this group, there is the Ombudsman, and there's a student advocate. And those are the independent groups, and it makes sense that they should all be here. It makes sense that if you think about where is the independent operation, it is here, and all those groups are responsive to some aspect of the need of people in the city to have an independent voice. And we need to do a better job of figuring out how we're going to make all the work of those 3 groups synergistic so that people are getting more bang for the buck, and yet understanding that all 3 offices are very tightly budgeted. There's not lots of time to do a lot of coordination. So how do we do that? That's what we really want to talk about. And then we're going to bring that discussion here. The other thing we're going to that we want to do is to make a piece of the retreat focused on this. Again, how these 3 offices can work together synergistically to provide the different kinds of services, voice, etc., to our constituents, families, and so on. So that'll be on the panel. So I think it's moving well, and well.
And I'll say to that point, I think what we also realized is we were kind of grappling with, I think, were some issues that bubbled up to the top, but also just grappling with the budget process in general. What we realized is that we want to also make it possible for not just leadership, with, I think we need some technical support from the entire board, really, and our sister offices be fully involved and make the budgeting process more participatory. And what I said in our meeting earlier this week is that while we're rounding out our process for the FY20 budget, we are quickly approaching our FY21 budget process. And so we've also talked to John Paul about making sure that we leave space for board members to be caught up on that, but that we also begin the process earlier enough so that we can include the voices of both the full board but also our sister offices. And so we're really committed to doing that deeper coordination between those offices so that in the future both our programmatic priorities and our budgeting priorities are more in line. So I think, like we said, we can get more bang for our buck on behalf of residents in the district. So we just wanted to update you about that. The work is not over by far, but we think we're at a good place to really move those priorities forward during the FY20 process.
And let me raise just one other thing that sort of came out of that meeting and a subsequent lunch that I had with the Ombudsman, which is part of what we do want to do is, and some of you have heard me talk about this, sort of creating a better and more systematic feedback loop between sort of the board as a whole, conversations that we all have with our constituents, whether it's at board meetings or whatever, and then back to the board. And that will be part of what's on the agenda at the retreat. But in addition, if you're having such a meeting coming up, and I know that Emily and Zach are, consider bringing one or both offices to be part of that agenda in some way, and both of them are in the next couple of weeks. So just keep that in mind. Again, it's just a way to sort of pull everybody into a common conversation and a common effort.
And the last thing I'll say is, to Jack's point, we are going to have to ask for more. And so we're going to need the full board support at the council to really make sure that we get the resources we need to advance those priorities. I appreciate when this issue was raised, a lot of our members are concerned around this issue, and I think we've come up along with our ombudsman and student advocate, at least the structure and the admin committee, at least the structure of what we can do to advance those priorities. But it's going to be a very short window, and we're going to need everybody's support. So we'll also be reaching out to ask you to also advance those priorities. So we've got some work to do to come up with the numbers around parity.
Sometime after next Thursday, I would
Yeah.
say, that's sort of what we're gonna.
But the budgeting process and the moving of funds is gonna go on through at least mid-May, early June, but we're gonna need a continued effort to make sure that it stays at the top of the council's agenda.
3 quick rapid questions which can be answered in 10 seconds less. First, thank you all for taking the lead. Thanks, Karen, for also being a part of finding a resolution on this. Is it correct to assume that in that proposal, and I echo Jack, I would like to see it as well, in that proposal, we've requested a lump sum of money, but we haven't quite figured out exactly how it's going to be directed to those 2 offices? Is that
No,
correct?
I think it's the opposite, is that by virtue of what we put in, we had a lump sum, it's not, right, we had an amount, it was less than anybody had asked for. And as John Paul said, it got placed in the wrong places to begin with, which I don't think was the main issue.
And we filed a correction for that.
We corrected that and corrected it in a way that included, as I said, sort of a raise for the advocate and some down payment on the parity issue.
Got it.
The rest of it, it's about coming up with new dollars, so it's part of a broader package of stuff, and we're working that through and have that.
Thank you. Second question, which is connected. Did we adjust the ask for the research funding?
We haven't done anything to that yet.
So we haven't changed anything?
No, that wasn't part of what we were in a position to do. That is part of what we'll talk about next week.
Got it. And then third and last question about priorities. I know we're going to talk about the working groups. I know it seemed like you had a discussion, any update there around how we're embedding those 2 offices' priorities or interest in our priorities that we voted on?
I think we're gonna weave those into our conversations in June and at the next retreat. So, and so I think there's still room to adjust based on the needs of all of our offices. But I think we decided to continue those. Well, one, I think our first priority is this year's budgeting process to make sure that those priorities get met. But post that, we're going to continue
So is it
discussions we're having at the retreat.
Thanks for that. Is it safe to assume that at the retreat, we will have an opportunity to kind of do some of that tweaking to embed how our 2 sister offices' work might fit into our priorities?
Well, yeah, that's part of what will be the retreat agenda, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think
And vice versa, right? I mean,
and I think the vision of more regular retreats was to make sure that we had that continual checking in and we were able to adjust based on what was happening. And I think this is one of those opportunities.
And with that, let me just remind anybody who hasn't done their due to get the retreat done, please do so that we can get it done on that. And then the other thing is, we're gonna try, we had such a hard time getting that second retreat, if we need to start almost immediately on their date. So just so people know that that's important so that we can. And more broad, let me just say more broadly, Zachary, to your point, is our next meeting really is the one where it's next admin meeting, it's one where we're gonna start, we'll be able to talk more substantively in a way that then feedback.
Is the Google Doc or whatever that thing is that done by everyone already?
I can check now. Like,
Doodle as opposed to,
Google.
you can Google Doodle.
Oh, perfect. You say tomorrow,
Just looking at the fact that we know it's not that.
oh, it's not.
As of yesterday.
No, I mean, I know, I did it
People.
this morning. So did anybody else do it today?
I can send reminder notes to those who have not.
But to that point, it might just be work before people leave today.
Yes. So the only other things that I wanted to talk about in the leadership report, we had a good conversation with OSSE today about social studies, but I'll raise that when we talk about the working group on social studies. The next public meeting, I think people already know this, is that the big focus is around road and especially high school growth, looking towards getting a proposal from OSSE in May or June. So that should be a very interesting panel. And do people know about that? We want to hear a little briefing on who's going to be on that panel. Do people have that? Is that just a research work?
You're talking about growth as far as the metric on the report card?
Yes. Anyway, it's a, all right.
Sorry, when you say panel, what did you mean?
So,
I thought it would be them bringing it to the entire board.
yeah, that's what I mean. It's a panel, as we've had it the past couple of meetings. So there'll be a set of people making presentations. And it's a couple of people who are local and a couple of people of at least 2 and maybe 3 sort of broad presentations to sort of bring all of us up to speed on these issues.
And that's at the next working session?
That's the April working session. Have we?
April.
You mean
April
I'm sorry,
meeting.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, April. When?
I think I saw that. It's the Empower 12K and a couple other
Yes,
people are on that.
yeah.
I think I saw that, yes.
All right, anything else before we go to the working groups? Okay, so I want to say just a couple things about sort of them in general, and then the idea is you've got the notes from them, and people from the group can sort of weigh in about anything that's not on that, and ideas that we can go. So let me just say this, that the idea for these groups really was to have something that was sort of kind of an informal setting where we could sort of talk out some of these ideas and try to get a sense of where was the enthusiasm, where were the ideas, what kinds of things would we do before we made it and sort of see where we are. So, as kind of like I expected, they're pretty general. There's a lot of information gathering that's still going on. Let's just go one by one, starting with teacher retention. Let me say you've got notes from each of them. They're going to go, I believe, so they'll be available. I know the teacher retention group has a Google Doc for the group. I guess that's not, never mind. Yeah, that's just for documents. The notes that are going out, you'll see they're draft because they are draft. They're going to continue to sort of develop over time. People's ideas about them might change, but we wanted you to sort of see the state of play. And with that, let's go in order. I think the first one was teacher retention. You got the notes there. Say the key thing that ultimately came out of there, I think, is this idea that has been tossed around, which is to try to do some survey. And we need to understand why teachers are leaving. And we all have hunches, but we don't absolutely know what the mix is, what the why is, and therefore exactly what to do about it. So the first idea is to do some kind of survey of both teachers that are leaving right now and teachers who haven't left, so we can get a sense of what's on their mind. So there's some mix of an exit survey and maybe a phone survey of members. Part of what we're trying to do is figure out partners, whether in DCPS or whether in the charter sector or whether in some of the independent groups, how we might go forward with that. So that's sort of what that's at. With that, let me just throw it open to the people who are on it. Emily, Fraser, Marcus. And Zach.
Have we fleshed out this as an exit survey on who would be polled? Whether, for instance, would it just be teachers leaving the system entirely? Or would it be teachers leaving from one school to another? Would it be teachers leaving from DCPS to charter and vice versa? Have we even thought about that at all?
We've talked about it. It should be every teacher. First question when you come back. And if you're not coming back, then the other question. If you're the teacher and you're coming back, that's the end of your survey. Submit it. We'd like to have the numbers again. If there's no survey at all, the DCPS, I'm just talking about DCPS. There isn't a survey for anything at all. I mean, I wasn't even, nobody asked me when I was leaving. I told them. So it has to be, every teacher has to, you know, I guess as far as data is concerned, and numbers and all that other stuff that data people do, is you need to have that number.
I understand that, but it would also be opt-in, and teachers would elect to report this information if they wanted to. We couldn't force teachers to do this. So,
Well,
mean-
everything that we're asked to do as teachers, I guess we're asked to do it. But, I mean, it's not any kind of a punishment or anything. It's just trying to find out, because we don't know.
no, I think, no, I agree. I'm not saying
Because we
there's
do
anything
surveys
against it.
throughout
I'm
the
just
year.
saying that some of our data might be skewed because we're not getting 100% accurate view of all of the teachers leaving. We obviously know that we have our ideas, each of us, on why teachers leave, but obviously we've learned and we've seen from a lot of different research that teachers leave for a myriad of different
Right.
reasons. So it would be self-reporting. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's two.
if they wanted to.
I would say, to add on to what Ferebee said, I think it's still a little bit in the air because part of the question is, who are we partnering with? Because that'll determine what kind of list we have and what kind of ability we have to get a broader versus a smaller.
Have we put out any RFPs?
We're not even at that point. We're
Okay.
sort of talking to sort of officials in different places to sort of see what might be viable.
Okay.
So I would say that's where we're at, and depending on who ended up wanting to be part of this, and you could imagine that it could be a telephone call where you wouldn't have that kind of fall off potentially. You had a list, you could potentially call them. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. So I'd say we're not quite at that point. But it's an issue that we have talked about. How do you make sure you reach the broad cross section so that what you get is worthy? And there's sort of a lot of questions on that.
And it's an issue that many people have acknowledged, but we have no data on.
No, yeah,
Well,
no,
data
obviously.
in terms of the reasons.
I just want to make sure that if we're putting any money behind this poll, that we're going to get reliable data from it, because obviously it's going to be self-reporting, and teachers don't have to report. And if you've left and someone's asking you, oh, please, I get polls and surveys all the time. I got one from Blue Cross Blue Shield the other day. Did I report, information or answer the survey? No. And I mean, a lot of. But I just want to make sure that anything that we're doing, that the data that we collect is going to be reliable, and it's going to be an actual, true sampling that we can,
Well, what I would say is that's high on our mind, whether it's a true sample or it's a sample that we know is a certain way. That's sort of part of what we have to talk to some experts about.
I think that my goal is that for DCPS is that Chancellor is in charge of the data, and the DCPS, or maybe OSSE, because OSSE's over both the charter and the public school, finds the people that are here, like right now, in April, all right? There are people right now in April who know they're not coming back next year, but haven't told anybody.
Right.
Right? And we don't know why people leave, and that's what we need to find out. Why they leave. What are the percentages of teachers that leave because of the system? What are the percentages of teachers that leave because they got a better job? What are the percentage of teachers that leave because they want to do something else?
Exactly. No, I agree with you.
You can finish up your sentence.
I just don't know if we have, to Frazier's point of doing a sampling now, it would take months for us to put this together. We wouldn't be able to get any data, or we wouldn't even be able to put a
But it
poll
might,
together
see, the
for
thing is, it might
end
not
of
be
school
us.
year.
It might not be us that would have to do it. It could be us that are being that bully pulpit to get somebody else to do it. We need to get it done. I agree with what you're saying completely. because we don't have anything to do yet. But it's gotta be, somebody's gotta do it. And we, you know, we're supposed to be in charge, we have something to do with both the charters and the public, and the numbers are the same. And it's not, it's embarrassing, the numbers are embarrassing. So we gotta push, that's gotta be, I'm gonna ask the questions that you said.
Yeah, so I have two questions about it. One is, there is a lot of research nationwide on why teachers leave. So my first question is, why do we think that the district's teachers' answers will be substantively different from what the national studies say? Second question is, when we get the data, which if we do a broad sample and we have any involvement in collecting it, which I agree, we might not, it won't be cheap to do it. It will cost a significant investment of research resources. What will we do with the findings, and what do we hope to be able to do? Is it simply to display the research and nudge agencies towards some action? And is that something we can't do with the extant research that exists?
So that's a great point. We don't know what it is because we're not the same system as the other state systems, right? We have a different dynamic here. Why people leave than they do. It's a lot of it's the same.
We know that, though.
We don't.
Well, so that's the hunch. We have a hunch that somehow our teachers' reasons for leaving are substantively different.
What we do know though is, even from the cursory research we've done, is that turnover rates are higher here than elsewhere in the country. And so maybe, you know, it may be that they're absolutely different, or it could be all of those factors are hyperdrive and it's all in that, right? All of those common factors are hyperdrive, but we just don't know either. And because our rate is higher, you know, someone has a responsibility, and I think the board's in a position to be able to figure out why.
Let me say one thing on that is, I think we're long before we're at the point where we're writing our questions, but what I do believe in very much is if you're gonna have good research, you want people at the table who have a whole bunch of different hunches so that you're making sure that you're testing all the different ideas, and that when you're done with it, people, the whole group around the table can say, yeah, that was my question, and here's the answer. And so there's a commitment to that. I don't think we're at the point of doing that yet, but that would be the idea, and I'm jumping ahead a bit. Part of what we talked about in the research group was that the research working group might play a bit of a role and to sort of kind of vet each of these research projects as they go through, as sort of one more set of eyes on that. So.
To that point, Justin, to mention the research that we did review, there was a bellwether research project or survey of DCPS, although I think that was a subset of teachers, perhaps highly effective, those rated highly effective. And we did take note of the top 3 reasons. The top reason, if I'm not mistaken, being if they felt supported by leadership in their schools. I think the third reason being the evaluation system. So that is one data point that we have. I also did off the record informally talk to,
Sorry.
Oh, no.
I don't think the evaluation reason is the one in the bellwether report, because they were highly effective teachers. They did not rank that as highly.
Well, I thought that was number 3.
No, I could be wrong.
I could be wrong. To that point, though, yeah, that does make sense. To that point, I also informally at the Ward 5 Council of Education spoke to Liz Davis, obviously the president of Washington Teachers Union, who is very passionate about this, who says and feels very strongly that it's a host of reasons, one being the evaluation system. I share that to say she also mentioned that they do have a lot of the data that we're looking for. Now,
The data in terms of the lists.
in terms of the list and in terms of surveys. And so when I pushed and said, wait, but do you have that for every teacher? She says, yes, we have that for every DCPS teacher. And that could have been within reason. And I don't mean to throw out there, but I share though that is those are 2 places we could go, at least within DCPS, to follow up. Off the record, I also know some of the.
It's not really off the record. That's exactly
Okay. Well, I'll just say To Ashley's point, there would be an opt-in process, especially I'm thinking for some of our charters. I think there might be some barriers for some charters wanting you to investigate why teacher turnover is so high. But I do know that some charters are already likewise collecting this information and have a handle on it. So it's when we talk about inviting people to the table, I just want to be cautious that it's not the state board, but we're actually inviting the people to the table who may actually have a finger on the pulse of what's driving this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, both in terms of helping to create the survey and also some outreach in terms of partnering on the lists, right? I mean, that's a question. We're not yet at a point where we can sort of say, oh yeah, there's all this interest in working with us so much so that we're gonna sort of use join this. But that's part of what's on the table. I mean, part of the idea is partnering insofar as that works. Okay. All right, any final on that? So the summation of this is our meeting was similar to this, which is that sort of big immediate idea.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of work to do to pursue it. And then just a quick response to Jessica on then once you have some ideas, I think there's a lot of things we can talk about how you pursue it.
But to that question of the goal of the committee, would you say it's to figure out the people around the table for them to take flight? Or is this for the State Board of Education to try to forward this work? Because I disagree with the idea that we have the capacity to do it, primarily because of budget reasons.
To do the research and stuff,
Yes.
once we decide.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have the money.
But we have these
Not yet.
Well, not yet.
three
Maybe that might.
organizations that must have people in their organization that can do that kind of work. You know, that know all about data.
We don't know who wants to do that sort of, right, then we'd be in better positions to answer that question.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right, rich curriculum. So this one, I don't want to talk so much. Do you want to talk about it? Or, I mean,
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
So we, by the way, you'll see at the end of the notes, there is a possibility of renaming this to align it with the priorities that we talked about, to be the Rich Education Committee. Basically, we talked about what we would do here and why we would do it. That's sort of my ultimate question in all these things. Like, why are we doing this? Why have this? And why we would have this is that the research shows that students are going to be more successful as readers, as learners, if they get the content and exposure to content in the lower grades. And brain research and more learning research is coming out on this, and we think this is something we would like to elevate as a board to make sure that, one, the research is in the hands of our educators, our LEAs, our SEA, and that we raise this as an issue, as something we think may not be happening. Certainly not happening equally across all of our LEAs and across all classrooms in all schools and all LEAs. So we talked about how we would do this work, whether we would think about it from getting master schedules of schools, asking folks for them and taking a look at what the schedules say is happening in the early grades, or whether it would make more sense to approach this from a survey or focus group conversation. And one of the things that came out of this session was we would start having conversation with schools and school leaders in our own travels around our wards to ask them how they would suggest we approach this. So I had a conversation with Principal Bell at Watkins Elementary, in depth with her about how she would suggest we approach this, and she basically said, I'll give you my schedule, I'll open up space in my building to have focus groups, you can invite teachers from other schools too. So I think that we see at least some willingness to do this. We also talked about sort of what might happen to information we get from schools if we work with coalitions of willing versus trying to do it more broadly. So while we have no answer on that yet, we discussed the possibility of what that might be. And then we talked about what we would do afterwards, which is what would we do with information once we got it? How would we share it out with LEAs? To what end would we hope this information was useful? Some things that were still topics for discussion. Were we talking just about K2 in terms of grade levels? We're talking about K5. I made a push for middle school. I think I got voted down on that one. But I do think that this is kind of an issue across all grades, and I think we landed right now more on K-5, but not
Yeah, I
as
thought sort of a
set.
compromise in a way, not even just a compromise, but that's sort of what we wanted was the K-5, which I think everybody was kind of for.
And Jessica simultaneously marked on her own middle school.
I did. So I made a spreadsheet of all middle schools in all the wards. I've only gotten through wards 6, 2, and 3 so far because 2 and 3 have very few middle schools. Ward 6 is a lot. All the rest of y'all have a lot. So I'm working my way through it, basically looking at the staffing lists of what schools say their staffing looks like for science and social studies in the middle grades. If you click through on schools' websites, many of them list their teachers. And so I've seen some schools that have shared teachers across 2 grades for science or social studies, schools that have humanities, and I'm looking at DCPS and charter schools. Really, I'm a giant nerd. But it's been interesting to sort of dig in. So once it's done, I'll share it with everybody. And then we also discussed whether it should focus on just the academic subjects or also art, music. We looked at some research and brought up some research that shows that arts exposure is also quite important and has measurable outcomes for student success in tested subjects rather. And then finally, we were sort of discussing the notion of how we would handle things in schools that have non-traditional instructional models, so things like St. Coletta's. If anyone watched the DC Public Charter School Board hearing today, it was a big topic in that conversation, but also schools like expeditionary learning schools or Montessori schools, where classrooms aren't quite as clearly broken down and time may not be spent in clearly measurable ways, where the notion of spending time on science and social studies and ELA may all be blended together into one expedition, as it is at Two Rivers Public Charter School. So, anything else I missed?
Oh, I just want to say one thing, which is on this issue, what do we call it? Somebody, I think it was Scott Goldstein at our hearing, if I'm remembering, where we called it curricular equity. Which I thought was kind of a nice way of talking about it, because that is really what we're talking about. And then it's sort of, it's not exactly curriculum, which sort of makes people jittery about the same word, but curricular as an adjective just means, are we giving people the same kind of stuff in this area? So I kind of thought that was a nice, gift. Rich education. And it's so broad. That's anyway.
Well, it's gonna, I mean, just what we've talked about just in the last 20 minutes, if you think about it, if we do like 10% of what we talked about, we've done a whole lot.
Blown up the system.
Yeah.
We got all rich education A, rich education B, rich education.
What was the rationale for only focusing on K-5?
To be targeted, I mean, that's really what it was. I mean, I originally walked in with sort of thinking more of a K2 because that's really where, at least according to some research, that's a huge issue and it's really focused and there's a lot of research on it. I was persuaded that that was too narrow and I tried to persuade others that also taking on the middle schools would be too broad. And that's sort of how we think about the K-5. And I wouldn't say it's a totally done issue, but I think that's sort of where the consensus is.
Focus on K-5 for the research aspect of things.
Well, that what we're looking at is how elementary schools typically do or don't include this, right? At the middle schools, there was a big issue last year. I think it's being attended to in the budgets. But that was the other thing I want to say is part of what makes this also kind of timely and interesting, I think, is DCPS, partly as a result of what happened last year in the middle schools, has put out guidance that really requires, all the way through a certain number of minutes a week on these different subjects at different grades. And so it means we're sort of at the beginning of kind of an experiment and effort, and that may make everybody really more inclined to, let's find out baseline, how much is being taught or not, so that we can see progress, or if there's not progress, but we're moving forward together. And
It's sparking some interesting conversations, I'll say, with principals that I've been in schools I visited since we had this conversation. For understanding, like, when they departmentalize elementary school grades, that shifts the notion of when you have a self-contained third grade classroom, a teacher can spend a certain number of minutes a day on what they're teaching. But if you've got departmentalized third grades, where people are moving between 2 classrooms, one teacher is focused on math, one is focused on ELA. Asking those teachers who have become accustomed to focusing on either ELA all day or math all day to now add another subject is a different situation than you're asking a self-contained teacher who's used to switching between subjects to focus more minutes on a particular subject. And that wasn't something I thought of because I've seen schools departmentalize at 4th and 5th grade. I've now seen, just in these questions I've asked, schools departmentalize as early as 1st grade, which is a big shift from what I understood to be happening in other schools.
So are they not teaching other subjects, or just teaching math? Yeah.
There was a reluctance to say that explicitly, but that's the gist that I got.
So it's a lot of interesting, okay, Ellen. I'm interested in just putting this out there that I didn't realize it was just K-5 and science. But I think civics education is really important, and I am interested. I guess maybe that fits more in the social studies one, so maybe I'll just bring that up there. Okay, never mind. One more time on that since I have no, but any Karen, did you
I
want
just
to
have a quick question. Why K-5 when most children learning development starts at a younger stage? The growth in your social, emotional, and all those abilities start at birth, and if you don't get it then, by the time they get to kindergarten, it's very late. That's my question.
But I think
Just
it's
for
early
folks answering, we are about 5 minutes out.
Okay, I'm just saying, you don't have to answer that, but I'm saying if you go on looking into this issue, then you need to start early.
I would say though that early childhood tends to be richer, and they don't compartmentalize as much. I hope not, anyway.
No, I'm just saying, but if you're looking at growth in children, then you have to make sure that they start early, because by the time you get to kindergarten, all that mindset is being set, and you can't
And
undo
it
it.
could be, I would, again, on the targeting issue, I worry about going to whole different school settings, which is sort of inclusive. No, I know, but to your point, I think insofar as you have schools that start at PK, we're looking at that school, so it could, I take your point, I mean, we gotta.
I mean, to Karen's point,
Yeah.
I don't understand, well, I shouldn't say I don't. I support broadening the grade level ban and should just look at schools in general.
If you're gonna do it. If this is the issue that we're going to deal with, then we need to deal with the issue, and not just the outcome by the time the child gets to kindergarten.
So there's consensus on trying to go down the PK, if you're also raising middle schools, but is that what it is?
That's obviously.
So I
Well, I was gonna say, I think Jessica's doing some preliminary.
Things like middle school goals here, secondary school.
Yeah, but I think even if we stage it, right, I think if we find something that, I think we're expected to find something that probably concerns that other grades, that would not be motivation for us. But I think it's all gonna be a capacity thing, so I think we can judge it based on for real.
Because we need to put in a budget for another.
But we also know people care about what's tested, and I think that's the elephant in the room. So
Which is part of why we don't
schools
want to.
care about what is tested, and we know ELA and math is tested, and so that's where a lot of time, energy, and effort goes.
And I think to your point, exactly, Zachary, my hope in this is to push the mindset that what gets tested gets done, for sure, but what we fail to do negatively impacts our test outcomes. So we have to rework the wiring in our own adult brains that says, I don't do test studies, it's not tested. Like, yeah, but if you don't have any context for the passages you're reading on the ELA tests, you're going to totally flop on them. So we need to.
You can't do social studies or science.
Speaking of social studies, I'm picking up on that. All right, next report on social studies, and we can keep coming back to this, guys. You want to do the,
I was gonna say the next one is research, but.
I know, I was trying to find a segue. Social studies is quick. Let's do social studies.
Yeah, so the consensus among the group initially, the first consensus was that, and the staff did look at it, that social studies is almost outdated of standards, and that it's worthwhile to do it both because they're tremendously outdated, but on top of that, there was an imperative, I think, to really hone in on social studies as civic engagement, as global studies, and all of those things. And so, sorry.
You don't stop it, it's over time.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But I think we also talked about how we compare it to regionally, right, and how there may be a possibility to lead that work on a regional basis.
Anybody
I
know
wasn't
that?
there.
Oh, I was in Australia.
Oh, yeah, well, here you go.
That's outside that region.
Alright. But yeah, no.
With the premise being that we should update them, right?
Right. But that there's a possibility of partnering with our counterparts around the region to say, one, how big it is, two, given a broad perspective of views and values, and that it may make our proposals more comprehensive so that our students kind of get full scope.
And there's, not just regionally, but why we could even reach out to NASB and see what states are doing nationally. Across the entire U.S. To see where we lie and where we rank
As far as
other states.
curriculum.
Social studies standards and who has what other states have done, not just, and to Marcus's point, he was saying, put together a regional task force to see who's doing what regionally. It looks like Maryland just did some updating in 2010, but to see nationally, we could reach out to NASB, and see what they're doing.
Yeah, it's sort of two different issues. One is who might we work with on creating something on the general landscape, looking at what's going on nationally. I mean, staff is, I believe, already working on that. Sort of where have they been updated, where haven't they been updated, what kinds of conversations were had, what kind of changes were made, national council for the social studies system teachers, all those national groups, the state. We try to get just a real sense of what others have done so that we know what we're getting into.
Two quick things. As was mentioned in the committee, Jessica and I are attending a cross-sector conversation on this tomorrow, and so I'm sure there will probably be a lot of interest. Also,
On
social studies and expanding. Since nothing is on top. And then secondly, I would just mention that I had mentioned our efforts to some teachers actually at Bancroft, and they're really excited. Two of the things that they just mentioned, just throwing it out there, is the need of highlighting and prioritizing DC history, which I learned comes in 3rd grade, and then students are learning a lot about Native American history and others in the younger grades, where their perspectives where they don't necessarily have the context. So
we will return to this, but we have our guest, Dr. Ferebee.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you for coming to join us.
Thank you. Is this seat low on purpose? We got plenty more. No, it's really great to be with you, right? Yeah, this is real good.
I said one thing.
Yes.
You're leaving, I think we have you for half an hour, is that right?
Yes.
And then you have a hard stop.
Yes.
So I assume you're gonna talk to us for 10, 15 minutes, and then we're gonna shoot questions at you or Nicholas, whatever. Is that what you think?
I'm flexible. So it's totally up to the group how you want to spend the time. Is there a particular way that you were thinking about the
Well,
time?
I think if you start with maybe 10 minutes, that'll give people time to shoot some questions out.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
And there will be many,
Yeah.
my guess.
Man, I have answers, though. But it's good. Yeah, I didn't know. You got a student.
Why don't we start?
Okay.
Yeah, just give them one name.
Why don't we just start very, very quickly, just go around, say your name, your ward, and if you want to say half a sentence, but not more, and then just go around. So
Ashley McClay, I'm at-large representative citywide. Thank you for being here.
Zachary Parker, representing Ward 5. Actually, I'm going to have to tip out to go to another bit, but I'm thrilled that you're here.
Thank you, sir.
Jessica Sutter, Ward 6, we've met. Nice to see you, Dr. Ferebee.
Cameron, 47. Yeah.
Tatiana, student representative, appropriate.
I'm Fraser Wood,
Board 3, I just saw you, and President of the Board.
I'm John Ball, that makes it correct.
Pleasure.
These are our guests from OSSE.
Hello.
Dr. Johnson. Accountability? And, yeah, our amazing.
Justice. The good news is I'm always there. Already, everybody in the room.
Ladies, these are our staff over here, research, fellows, communications, and ombudsman's office. Okay.
So a couple things top of mind, so we have, as much time as possible for Q&A. Just seeing Tatiana makes me think about a celebration. Recently got word that Baloo High School Academy for Hospitality is earning the honor of being the Distinguished NAP Academy, which is a pretty big deal. It's a national recognition for a great program there. I mention that because I do think, as you have thought about secondary performance, I believe we have a model in the NAP academies that is serving our students well. We look at those students that are in those academies and those students that are not. We see higher GPAs, we see better course completion, we see better attendance, and ultimately better post-secondary outcomes. So it's something that we're looking to expand and leverage for students in DCPS. Other topics that are top of mind, just to let principal cabinet, and we were talking about early childhood education attendance, and whether or not we wanted to put some teeth in attendance for early childhood education. You can miss up to 20 consecutive days, and potentially miss up to 80 school days a year. And for students that we want to ensure that are on grade level receive appropriate instruction to match the early literacy skills, the social and emotional skills. We need them there every day. And so as we look at some elementary schools, if you look at the NC attendance, it's actually higher for K-5 than it is for pre-K3 and pre-K4. So as we have made investments in this tremendous opportunity, we're pleased that the mayor has invested in this in the proposed budget. We want to get the most out of it. And so it's something we're thinking about. And then we talked a lot today about, kind of principal retention. And we've acknowledged that is a source for, in many cases, ensuring that we're attracting and retaining teacher talent. And oftentimes you see the connection between the principal role and the teacher role as it relates to ability to keep up in practice. And then we discussed getting feedback around the budget season and how we can ensure that process is something that we continue to improve with greater transparency, just so people understand where the dollars flow. It's interesting, principals raised that there's a lot of advocacy in many cases around budgets in schools, but oftentimes there's a disconnect between conversations actually with the principal and then what's being advocated for, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then transportation. Just want to make sure that we give students the best and most appropriate transportation to and from school. I think those are all the topics that are top of mind there. I think mostly everybody here has heard my story. So the only thing I leave you with, I'm a proud member of the family business. And I think we've got the best job here in the city as chancellor. And the great thing about DC is it's part of our challenge as well. So it's some of a blessing and a curse. But really excited that we have made some progress and we have some challenges. I believe we have the resources, the people, the talent, and the coalition to continue to try to make it. So, but there, I'll stop. I think I used about 10 minutes of that time.
Good.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you.
all right, who wants to jump in? Emily? Ashley? Tatiana. Was Tatiana before Ashley?
Go ahead, you
had
can go first.
first.
Yeah, Tatiana should go first.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello again.
Hello again. Good to see you.
So my main question for you is, as a new chancellor coming in, we talked about transparency and building trust. And first, I would like to say that I appreciate you and highlight to the board that on Chancellor Ferebee's tour to Baloo, I recommended that he come to lunch with the students and dress out of his suit because his suit symbolizes someone who is just there to come one time. And he came to eat lunch with us and he wore jeans and Jordans that students were wearing. So it was very nice, and they still talk about themselves.
I will come back again before graduation.
Did you get him a blue shirt?
Yes. I will. Yes. I have blue on that day. For the nights, yes.
And then my main question is, what is your main focus from now until graduation for secondary school, specifically high school? And not just about how many seniors graduate, but what is your main focus on how you want seniors to believe? I don't know how to phrase it, but basically, what do you want us to know your priorities are from young children?
So now to June at the high school level, one strategy I'm really excited about Tatiana is we, for the first time, are issuing what we call college and career readiness guides. It will be issued to every junior, senior. You'll get your transcript and you'll get an indication of where you are with your course completion. And then it also provides where you are as it relates to where you stand with college admissions, college and university reading. It also provides information on where you are as it relates to your interest, if you're going directly into the workforce. So if you're in a particular academy, it would be related, but it also provides like what you need to do where you are in that process. We believe that this is a great way to just share with students and families and give them perspective of what's ahead. We're utilizing this, and we've seen something similar play out with positive outcomes with attendance. So I know you're going to give these letters, but this year we also started with providing letters, my signature, to students that were chronically absent. It's very similar to what you would get in your mailings for your utilities. It shows you, you've seen it? Yeah, so
I got it.
you got one?
Yeah, I unfortunately I attend field trips
Okay.
and the attendance, it's not as bad with the communication in terms of getting absences to you. So
Yeah, so what has
they said
happened?
you guys go to court soon and things like that.
Yeah, what happens is, so it raises up awareness, and then students come back and say, no, I was really here, or raise awareness for families. So it's really good that it's a tool that has helped us just lift up the importance of the team and get data out to families. Tatiana, the other would be just ensuring that our students, as the year goes out, have been in contact with counselors around their FAFSA, their DC tag, summer youth employment, preparation for the summer and the school year to see how we can be more supportive of these last
So thank you for being here. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on your principal retention plans. Other states such as New York have put together mentorship models or have worked together with colleges. I know like Urban Tech partners with Columbia University to provide mentorship and principal retention resources for the state of New York City, or the state of New York. Do you guys foresee DCPS doing the same thing here, perhaps with, GW or Georgetown, or even UDC? And could you just talk a little bit more about principal mentorship programs and principal retention?
Yeah, I think our mentorship program is a possibility. We have some initiatives already that is more focused on cultivating leaders. Probably best if you've been a leader for a extended period already. But it's interesting, you know, I see a lot of value in replicating the LEAP program where there's focus on peer-to-peer learning. And oftentimes, I think our administrators don't get enough time to spend with each other, rather through their different issues together. So we've been trying to create more space for that. But at the core, what I hear from my principal is to retention and challenges. They're very much so interested in DCPS, pursuing multi-year contracts, which is something that I also stress interest in. So we're trying to work through what's the best path to get there. The other way that we are thinking about it, part of our budget is a restructuring to central service in some way that we are kind of lowering the ratio to instructional superintendent cluster in the number of schools they have, and going that ratio even further for our schools that are serving, our schools that are serving our most challenged population and have a history of low performance. For example, we're leaning into the leadership for capacity of food, where there would be a cluster support around those particular schools and have a smaller ratio. And then we're building a team around those clusters that include support for special education, data analysis, operations. So the goal is to create a one-stop shop for our principals through the instructional supervision support model. So that's one way to kind of shift the focus internally. But I will continue to look for our principals to tell us, what do they need, how to better serve them, and they want external mentorship, we have to focus on that. I know many of our principals have found value in the professional development experience that we allow people to participate.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've heard a lot of principals say that they want more PD and they want more autonomy to be able to help set culture for their schools.
I'm gonna put Marcus in because he has to go, and then I've got Emily, then I've got Jessica, and then I've got Brady.
Thank you again, Chancellor, for being here, and I apologize I have to go. We're celebrating some of our great educators in Utah here tonight. So I'm going to that. My rapid fire is two questions. One, I think operating on the assumption, especially in my ward, that folks feel like schools are the center of communities. I think one of our major concerns are about schools that we feel like are in decline, right? That have a rapidly decreasing enrollment. And what seems like, at least on its face, historically, disinvestment among those school communities. And so I appreciate, I think, what you said to Representative Clay's point around how you focus on the feeder, right? Because at Anacostia, for example, right, Ketchum is doing rockstar work, but there's a disconnect somewhere between Kramer and Anacostia, et cetera. So what targeted supports are we doing for schools like that to both raise the quality of instruction, but also, more than a problem of achievement, there's also a problem of reputation. And so how are we also making those schools attractive places that families want to come back to? And then my second question is around school maintenance. So we have beautifully renovated buildings. The problem that school staff and parents and students face are the regular maintenance and kind of the relationship with DGS on how we get those regular, that regular maintenance done so that toilets aren't breaking, so that doors, locks aren't broken, et cetera, on an ongoing basis. So how do you envision streamlining that relationship with DGS?
Yeah, so I think this is a really opportune time for DGS and DCPS because both are experiencing the leadership. And I think that as Keith and I come on board, we committed to strengthen the partnership so we can both better serve each other and ultimately we're better responsive to the needs of our facilities. We've also leaned in the principals to ensure that as these issues occur or facility needs come up, that they are raising those concerns to us quickly. And sometimes what we found is maybe because there's a history of not being responsive, you just let it go and don't raise the flag. response for facility needs. But we still have some ways to go, but I think ultimately it's going to be how we can partner with DCPS and communication between the two entities around facilities. I think DCPS will also tell you that they make DCPS a priority as a customer, which we appreciate it. The question you had around changing the perception is one of the reasons why I started with the highlight on the loop. I think we had to tell the positive stories and great things that are happening in some of our schools where there may be a negative perception around the student and the population, which is one of the reasons why we made a big deal about the student that received a scholarship from George Washington. We'll continue to do that. We will also continue to utilize the staff and the principal as well to get the message out to the schools. Your first question, I think, was around feeder patterns and what we're thinking around.
Well, just about schools that are experiencing a rapid decline in both enrollment and community support, and how we make those anchors again for the community, both by creating more attractive models and also investing in resources to raise the children.
Yeah, so I think what we've done in the past is not enough, and that is, we just implemented the stabilization legislation, which basically says even if you lose student population, we'll still continue funding at 95% for the previous year, which has been great if your enrollment's declined. Since 2015, we've invested over $20 million to maintain the level of funding for schools. But to your point, I don't know that we have invested dramatically different in terms of the instructional program. So we're very fortunate to receive some grant dollars from OSSE around the comprehensive support model for some of our one-star schools to make an investment in the instructional program. I'm also pleased that as we've had these sessions around planning and needs assessment, we've committed to an engagement process of ensuring that there's input and footprint from the community on those strategies. So we're in that process now, and I think as I go to meet, I'm here for family, like this is the first time that we've actually been told that we have a voice in how we transform our schools that have struggles. So because of that level of engagement, it will be slower, but we think it will be much more sustainable and effective because we built that runway for this type of investment. And a lot what I hear specifically in Ward 8 is interest in advancing careers in education, which is something that we're going to be very responsible.
So I was really curious to hear if you're going to talk more about the disconnect in the advocacy around budgets and what principals are expressing. And then I guess one of the specific things I've been hearing from different stakeholders, including principals, is about the comprehensive staffing model and how it impacts larger schools. But it seems not to that one thing that they are counting on is their per pupil amount going down every year. So that's just something I was wondering if that has come up. Yeah.
So I think the disconnect is, as I talk with principals, we've come to the conclusion that there's been advocacy for the school, but oftentimes the person advocating had to have a conversation with them. So oftentimes what they're advocating around, they don't necessarily have all the facts, nor were they involved in the budget development process, or were they a part of the LSAT conversation. So I think as a result of that, you have a lot of, like I said earlier, it's one of our greatest strengths, but it also is a challenge in many ways that there's so many people who are ready to advocate for DCPS. I don't know that they always are the most informed when they're coming to the table with advocacy. So that's the disconnect there. In terms of the comprehensive staffing model, I'll tell you very transparently that I think there are some inherent challenges when we allocate positions to schools based on enrollment, and we try to allocate the same way for all schools. So I think we have acknowledged that and are willing to think about other ways in which we can allocate resources to schools. I'm biased towards allocating dollars to schools and having schools kind of create their staffing plans with the dollars that they receive versus having a self-managing decision that everybody has or starts as a kind of foundation for their staffing model. But we need to do our own study and analysis of how that would play out to ensure that there's consequences of that. But I think it's a barrier sometimes to help people see how our policies are. So, having said that, there are easy ways to do that without shifting their thinking, but it's definitely something that's talked about.
Jessica. So I'll echo what Marcus said about DGS, and certainly something I hear from Ward 6 schools as well. I would also want to just ping you on the conversation you're saying about the NAP academies and having young people focused on careers. Having the honor of serving with Tatiana and Marjorie on our board and having heard from students at Woodson and Coolidge at the Big People Hearing and a bunch of student speakers, I hope that something DCPS considers is encouraging our high school students to consider becoming teachers. I'm watching as charter school networks welcome back a lot of their alums to start teaching. I had a professor in college who pointed out to me that he thought I ought to be a teacher, and that was what started me on that path. So I'd love to see DCPS promoting the notion of coming back to their district and teaching.
Absolutely. We have to grow up. The issue point we have now is we do have strategies around early childhood education. Love that we invest in particularly areas of color as a way to do that, to get them into the teaching profession. But given what we know about the future of kind of the talent pool for educators, I think every community has to think about how do you grow it. So, great point.
The one question I'd leave you with is planning for new schools. As we see certain schools in our communities losing enrollment, we also see Ward 6 is a place where we've got growing population. We've got new apartment buildings, we've got new low-income and mixed-income housing coming in, and I've talked with developers in each of those places, and there does not seem to be a coordinated set of conversations around how will we consider the impact of how many kids we expect to live in these developments, where they will go to school. And I'm particularly curious about how that may play out in Southwest DC, where we've got housing project communities, we've got new residential development, and we've got only one elementary school and one middle school in the traditional system, one charter school that serves early childhood that is losing its campus this year and won't reopen until 2022. And then one middle school, one charter middle school. So I'm just curious about planning in DC public schools for new schools, planning for growing enrollment.
Yeah. I wish we had more time.
I'll follow up.
Yeah, I think it is. It's tough because I think we try to be responsive to demands, requests, the growth that we experience. But I think oftentimes as you try to be responsive as these things come up, you can make sometimes decisions in a way that may not the macro perspective of you. And so we have actually a date upon us, I think it's 2022, where we've got to make some decisions about drawing lines. And I think we've got some pretty significant capital decisions coming up where we can think about space. And so we're now starting to start those conversations like what is our building stock, what do we own, where we have utilization to lead into a larger conversation around planning. I think where I don't think we have a solution today is like it's really hard to build schools in certain areas of our community because the space is so tight.
Yep.
in early childhood education is a space that we haven't used before. I think we can do that. But, good luck trying to find a place for you to build a school in some neighborhoods. And so, you know how to find a way to create it.
Thank you.
I would like to talk about teacher turnover, but I don't want to. Because at the budget hearing last week, I had the whole plan, I had my little plan for teacher turnover. And as I sat there listening for 3 to 4 hours to the people that were talking about it, they were talking about how they haven't had, the playgrounds are in horrible shape and nobody's doing anything about it. And you were talking to Marcus and to Jessica about about GDS. And I was just thinking that one of the ways that you could make an imprint, I think you made a big imprint already, is something that they had a pothole palooza. Mm-hmm. We had a snow palooza. They had to clean the streets. I think that DGS could do a school palooza. And just have those teams that they have, those flying teams or whatever they call it, to go to Truesdale Elementary, which doesn't have locks on doors. It doesn't, and the playground is in horrible shape and things like that. And they can fix it pretty quickly, I think, because they do it other places. And then it would be okay. There's a change that's happening in DCPS. Because there are a lot, I worked at Cardozo for 40 years, and the last 5 years at Cardozo was a brand new building, and if you go into Cardozo right now, it looks just the same as it did the day it opened. Custodians do a fabulous job every day to make it pristine every day.
I was there this week.
And I mean, it's fabulous.
I love the hardwood floors.
Oh yeah, but those are the original floors. But I was there since 1977. We didn't even have air conditioning until 2005, right? And nothing changed in the building. And a lot of teachers shouldn't have to teach in that kind of a building at all. And students definitely. If we got all these high schools now, all the high schools in the fall are going to be brand new buildings. Kids are going to go to their school. They won't even know what the old buildings look like. But there shouldn't be any student going to a school in DCPS where there are insects and rodents and disrepair. It's because it looks like nobody cares about it. So I'm just wondering if you've got this great relationship with Kevin at DGS, is why can't we do these, like, what are they called? There's some kind of a name for the team.
Flying squads.
Yeah, flying squads. It just, I mean, if the school calls and says, look, we've got a staircase falling apart, they just fly there and take care of it. And I mean, that's what they're getting paid. And it's a no-lose situation. I just thought I'd throw that out. How do you feel about it?
Honestly, when people bring up facilities, it's probably not a popular thing to say. But we have one of the best facilities that I've ever seen in a public school system. And, I think it's just one of those situations, like when you're in your yard is not the greenest grass, but I can take you to go to Baltimore. I can take you down south to Virginia, to Richmond. I can take you all across the country and show you the school buildings. And I'll tell you, DCPS has some of the best buildings.
Oh, I agree completely. But there also are, and there are several in Ward 4 that are falling apart and need help.
I think the challenge we have is we've invested billions of dollars, but still we have a lot of schools that have not been modernized.
I'm not really talking about
Recognizing the time.
Yeah.
Recognizing
So you said they've been modernized, but things still need to be repaired.
Yeah.
It's 6:30. You get to go, but I have to ask you.
Okay.
So I'm gonna be super quick,
Alright.
and I just wanna say, first of all, I really wanna echo this DGS issue. And you are absolutely right, we have the most beautiful buildings, and they're not getting taken care of in so many cases. And
Oh,
we're
I
having
forgot to
issues.
mention is the other thing that we tackle, I think will help, Frederick, is preventative maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes we're responding to stuff because the preventative work may not have been done. So that's.
And there's things that are constant, like I know in multiple schools where the old building comes together with the new building, there's constant leaking causing constant problems. So it's this idea that they're beautiful buildings and we should be maintaining them. So that's one. Second, I just want to jump on also, is in terms of the engagement, in terms of the new schools. You walked into this situation which you realize is there's all this pent up anger and anxiety about they're gonna not let us use our neighborhood school. I mean, we've got the Shaw situation, we've got the Hardy situation. There were issues in Ward 8 around the new schools there. So I just urge you, and I mean I hear it as you sort of think about these new schools, how do I think about engagement in the communities, because it hasn't happened, as you know. And it's not all in DCPS's shop, I get it, a lot of this is happening at the mayoral level, but you guys get blamed, and it has an effect on the ability of the feeder systems to function. And now to my question, which is also on teacher retention. And I wanted to get your sense, you know, we have, it's higher than higher than any other place we looked at in terms of, especially at our schools with the most at-risk students, it's higher than other places. The turnover is super high, and I'm curious about two things. One is any sense that you have of why, and what, if anything, is already in your head that we can do about it. And the second, related, I just want to say, we just had a conversation, as you know, it's a big issue for us. We hear about it all the time. It's disruptive. You know, it's one of the factors that prevents every school from achieving as much as they would like to. And we've been very on top of the issue. We're talking about doing some different exit surveys of teachers to really understand the why, so that we can work with others to put forward some solutions. And so we're starting to talk to people in both sectors about working together on an exit survey or surveys of teachers. So I want to put out there that we are interested in talking to you about sort of doing something like that, so that we can all jointly have some common understanding of it. But I am curious, you've now been here, you've been around, what's your sense of the why?
I would say, you know, so one area that I'm interested in the most is just ensuring that we are better preparing, better caring for and supporting our teachers. I think that's an area where I see big opportunity. You know, I think about my own experience. I survived as a beginning teacher because of my teammates that were also teaching fourth grade with me, my grade level. And, I think, you know, sometimes in the competitive nature that we're in, sometimes things are high stakes as they are. Sometimes you may not have that means of, thinking about developing, a person that's starting a profession around here. We do stuff at the beginning of the school year. I'd love to see us do more, and wrap our arms around teachers, because ultimately the teachers are the future. So that's one area that I think comes to mind.
Like I said, I hope it's not just the new teachers as in years 1 and 2, because you've probably seen this data in Ward 8, 75% of the teachers are gone from those schools before they finish their 5th year, before they're ended their 5th year. So it's not just the year 1, 2, it's, creating, so that we can create a culture that's able to support the kids in each other.
I agree. I mean, I think, definitely, I would say, I think about probably 1.5. 5 is kind of like that benchmark where you begin to start floating in the whole world.
If you got the support.
If you got the support,
Exactly. Exactly. All right. That was good. Do you want to do a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there is one place you can build for us. Because that's what it is. So if you want to build us a middle school, and we need one more done, that's
Where is that?
Western.
The one thing I like to raise on the teacher turnover is substitute teachers, and Tatiana and the other students in particular have talked about this at their student advisory committee and then at our meeting. Then part of the one result of the turnover is huge numbers of long-term subs. You know, if you have a hand on this, huge number of long-term subs in the schools, teaching classes for months and months and months. And I don't think people are fully aware of how extensive it is. We recommend it as something to get a handle on.
Yeah, I know, we talk a lot about student attendance, but not so much teachers.
Well, this is not so much attendance, that may also be an issue. This is really teachers who have left, sort of mid-year, and then there's no one there to replace them. And
it's not just teachers who left, it's the lack of of the pool of teachers, because I can give you an example where she's talking about my 10th grade year. I started the school year without a teacher at all. And the teacher didn't come until about November, and then she quit, saying that she was going back to her hometown to get her master's degree. And then we didn't get another teacher until like April or May. And that teacher is, I think, a highly effective teacher now at Blue, but it just took that long to get a teacher in. We had a long-term substitute for a long time, so about 75% of the class, 75-80% of the class, we had a long-term substitute. We were just given assignments just to ensure that we didn't have an incomplete on our report cards. And then we had problems with grades because when we did have the long-term sub, it was work that was being lost. It was students that were just coming to class to check in and then leaving. It was a lot of
University of Miami.
Yeah, they told me first.
thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch on the surveys.
Right, thank you.
You guys can jump to this. Thank you so much.
Alright, so we're gonna move to OSSE, and then we'll come back to the working group report and the rest of it, but we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. Why? I know that I scheduled it.
Sing it.
Transportation.
They're in their folders. And you do it. It's already-
All right. Yes. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back before you again. I'm Donna Johnson, Director of Accountability with OSSE. And tonight I know that you have a very long agenda, and it sounds like you are not behind, but I know that you've got some pressing issues to talk through, so I'm going to try and walk through this. We've given you the slide deck in advance, and there's quite a bit of information in there. So I'm going to try and streamline through this and give the highlights, and then be able to answer questions that you have about the details.
For awareness, this was the presentation date to the S task force last night. So we're there. Sorry.
We do have a few updated things on the ESSA task force, just because in terms of some of the information, we included feedback, so that you got feedback from what the ESSA task force have worked on, as well as updated data components with the tracking that we're going through on the slide. So there are a few things that are different, but a lot of it is, if you were at the ESSA task force, and I know several of you were, and were involved in that work, so this will be repetitive for some of you. So tonight's agenda, we're going to cover just a few things, give you an update on the engagement initiatives.
Now, I know, so we have half an hour with you. Will you do like 20 minutes of the 15, 20 minutes of the presentation, allow some time for the...
Yes, that's what I had said. I'm just going to try to stream through this so that allow the time for questions. We have the engagement updates to talk to you about how we're engaging with people, a little bit of the data pieces that I put together for you each time we've come before you, and I've done each month with the ESSA task force. And then overview of some of the design updates that we are planning for year 2, and then give you an update on where we are with the work going on with the access to opportunity, and then of course take questions. With our engagement, we are in what we're calling phase 2, which is our implementation and refinement. And as we've talked about before, this really started right at the launch. So we've been engaging with members of the community, with small groups, with a number of the groups and entities that we met with before the report card launch and following back up with them. We've had over 10 meetings. I know I just did another work session earlier today to allow people to understand where the data is on the report card, help them walk through and understand how to dig deeper into the data. There's a group of parents who are parents of students with disabilities, so they were really interested in looking specifically at how do they find some of that information. So we're continuing to do that, and then we also had a survey that was live until March 31st. So we are going to be pulling together all of that feedback from that survey. That's just one of the surveys. We're also gathering feedback from our small group meetings, some focus group meetings, and then some additional meetings that we have going on. One of the other things that we did is we signed on to partner with Mathematica on a research-based, that's a registered research initiative around the report card design, usability, and functionality. So that has been given its official registration number. Mathematica is starting on that, and that's a multi-year, obviously it's a registered research study. So it's a multi-year process, but that really is us looking and working with researchers towards that continuous improvement process. So as part of that, they're also going to be having some surveys and some focus groups as a part of that research. We have some train the trainer. We talked about having the parent ambassador, the community ambassador, people who are trained to understand how to teach other people how to utilize the report card to start those conversations with their schools, with their communities. So we've talked about that a little bit. We have both of those sessions scheduled now, and even though on the slide it says to be determined, I'm going to give you our location as well. So we have two sessions coming up. April 11th, which is next week, it's at Martha's Table in Southeast. And then Tuesday, April 23rd, we have just confirmed that will be held at the new Capitol View Library at 5001 Central Avenue, Southeast. So we'll make sure we get all that information out to you as well. And there is a link there when you have your documents, there's a link there to register, and I believe we've shared some of those registration information as well. Also, you all received a copy of the DC All-Star School Report, and that was released as a result of the school tour that the superintendent and members of OSSE staff did and met with teachers, staff, leadership, students in some cases at our schools, and that was to think about and learn from them about some of the best practices that were going on. As we dug into the results from our first ever run of the STAR framework and released our report card, we really looked across the city to look for areas that were excelling. So looked at places that had incredible growth for our at-risk students, areas that were really hitting it out of the park on addressing chronic absenteeism. So it was not just a high achievement, but it was looking at those pockets of success that we could learn from and publish information about so that we could provide resources for others to replicate those successes. One of the other things that was shared with you recently and is a recent release is the Data Quality Campaign released a case study on the work that we did in partnership with the state board around engaging parents on the development of the report card. And they chronicled that as a case study, and I know that was all sent to you, but earlier this week as well, after we already sent this deck out to you just yesterday, the Data Quality Campaign also released an update this year report on Show Me the Data. And they looked at all of the report cards across the country and outlined how data was being presented transparently and with ease of access. And when you take a look at that, if you haven't looked at the data file that they attached, DC came out looking very strong. A little update on our usage and feedback, and I try to put together little nuggets of data for you here, so I'm not going to go into each one of them. Our unique user count is over 40,000 at this point, and we've had almost 300,000 pages viewed on our report card. One of the unique trends that we saw was that we've really been trying to dig in and think about how people are progressing through the site, and what we found is that past the landing page, we're seeing that most sessions, and we have over 64,000 unique sessions that have occurred, most sessions beyond the landing page go first to the school's profile, and then they progress through at least one of the performance pages. And so the performance pages vary, but that's showing us that they're not just stopping at the profile page, they're actually looking a little deeper. And it depends, there's a lot of different paths that they go in. One of the other unique things you might find interesting here, something that I know jumped out at me, is that our most often visited page on the report card, other than the landing page, is our DC report. So that's the report that deals with aggregating all of the performance across the city in one report. So while as we thought a lot of people would probably go directly to schools, and we do have that happening quite a bit, over 16,000 views of the pages related to the DC report have occurred, which means that people are really looking at how is the city performing as a whole, which aligns with some of the feedback that we've received on improvements and the way in which we'll be displaying data for the report card moving forward as well. Here I have outlined how we're utilizing some of the feedback for the design of next year's report card. So it might seem like a long way off. To me, it's a deadline that's fast approaching. So we're already locked into making those changes and utilizing that feedback. And some of the things that we know are coming up are some new items that we had already anticipated for year two, things that we had said were going to be year two in inclusion, such as school finance. Our new DC science assessment will be on the report card. Those are all federally required items, as well as college enrollment and school leader experience. Also federally required items, but things that we didn't previously have that data to report on. So this coming year, they'll be able to be added to the report card. There are a lot of other changes there as well in terms of some of the language and detail changes. So really thinking about the feedback. We've heard some confusion of people saying that they think that the PDF is actually the full report card. So we want to change the title and label of that to make it very clear and communicate that a little bit better, that that is a snapshot of the report card, as well as change up some of the items that are on there so that it actually is a little bit more of a wider presentation of what's on the report card to the extent that we can. And then one of the things we've heard is people want to make sure they have a reference point. So as they're looking at the performance items, that they understand how does that match with what is going on at the full DC level. Do they have a DC comparable point that they can use as a comparison point? And then because this will be the second year, we will have trend data on there as well. So you'll be able to see how performance has changed, hopefully improved from one year to the next. And there are a lot of other changes there too.
Will you be able to access past years' report cards or past report cards?
We'll see the previous year's data. We'll have the downloadable data file available, but you won't actually have the live report card site.
Okay.
So, but you will see the trend data, so you'll be able to see last year's score on that metric and compared to this year's score.
Okay.
A couple of the visual changes that we talked about a little bit. Some of the things that we have heard things about, we wanted to make sure on the suspensions. This year, they were combined together as a total suspension. We, with a lot of the work around restorative justice, we want to make sure that we break those out so that we're not combining those together, but we're actually just going to show them as separate, and then take a look at how we can change and make some more comprehensive views around that, because that was a confusing piece for some people. We also know that the physical activity needs to be broken down into grade bands so that you can actually differentiate the number of physical activity minutes in elementary versus middle school and in high school as well. So those will be differentiated by grade bands. We have on the teacher data, when we have years of experience and the other teacher data metrics, we'll actually show the number of teachers that are included. So it'll be an end count that will be provided with the number of teachers that are included in that display. It's a bar graph that displays the years of experience, and so now you'll be able to see how many teachers are represented in that years of experience. Update on access to opportunities. A lot of this is a review, so I'm not going to go back through it. I know we've presented this information before, and you guys are very familiar with this metric, having really pushed forward.
Let me just say one thing for the new members. This is one of the things that is in the report card that is as yet undefined. I think it's 5 points.
In the star.
In the star rating framework, it's 5 points. It's undefined as yet, and we're awaiting at some point a proposal from OSSE on how those points will be.
So as you can see right here, this is actually the language directly from our ESSA plan, where the measure will be designed to promote the well-rounded experiences for students in engaging learning environments. And this measure would be further developed during the 18-19 school year, which is what we're trying to do right now. and then being able to test some data that we're able to pull together. And then what we had said in our formal, in our ESSA plan was, and that it may be able to be used in formal accountability results in 1920. So you'll see our timeline based on the work that we've been doing around developing this measure. We've been engaging with LEAs as well as talking with the ESSA task force about this, and I'll show you that as well. And then of course, any substantive changes to the framework would be brought before the state board for approval. Some of the considerations in creating a metric, obviously it must meet the ESSA statutory requirements. So in looking at that, that means that we must be able to disaggregate this metric by student group. We also must be able to design a metric that allows for meaningful differentiation. So we can't design a metric that would not present or have the feasibility to present any meaningful differentiation. We also have to make sure that the metric is valid, reliable, and comparable across grade spans. While it doesn't have to be identical in each grade span, we must be able to establish comparability. The other component is that we can choose any measure that we want as long as it meets those above requirements. Some of the other considerations that we believe are also important is taking a look at the administrative burden that these metrics take on, whether it be to the state, to the school, to the LEA. Also taking a look at making sure that we take the time that's needed to set up an accurate data collection that can be validated, that can be audited, that can be reviewed, and then we also set up and test business rules and make sure that the metric that we develop is measuring what's intended. So one of the things that we started with was taking a look at how some other states might be approaching similar processes. So what I've provided, and these are the same information that we talked about with the ESSA task force as well, is looking at a few other states that are going down the same road. One of the most interesting things is that states that have included this into their ESSA plan and that have tried to create a metric like this, most of those states have had to delay the implementation because they're actually encountering or have encountered a lot of the same challenges that we are in terms of how do we create a measure to meet all of those criteria that is not going to create an overwhelming burden upon schools for collecting the data, and then how do we make sure that we can validate that data and then have that data be something that could be audited as well. And then collecting that data, testing the data, making sure it measures what you want. So I've got a link there to some work that Louisiana is doing. They are currently in a very, very small beginnings of a pilot that will be rolling out next year with some grade spans in some schools and using only some areas of that metric. So they have a full plan as well, and you can look at that with the links that are there. Kentucky has actually kind of punted this a little bit beyond what they had originally proposed of waiting until 1920. A lot of that is because they are really trying to get their curriculum or their course alignment and matrix aligned. It's something they've been working on for a long period of time of trying to get course alignment, so common course code alignment, and they're trying to do that elementary, middle, and high school. The scary thing for us looking at that is that they started working on those course alignments years ago. We haven't done that at all. We've never had those common course code alignments. So that's a challenge that we'll be facing in this metric. Georgia has created something that they are working at called the Beyond the Core metric, and it really is taking more of a look at some of the arts curriculum and looking at courses beyond the non-traditional, and it's only for the elementary and middle grades. And that's primarily because at their high school level, they have a college career readiness metric, which takes along some of the similar paths than an access to opportunity, but that's been the focus that they did at high school. And then Maryland did two different types of well-rounded curriculum metrics, and the unique thing is that they are already looking at how they need to revise those metrics, having launched them without having done the kind of dry run of the data and seeing what happened. Their work is already pulling that back and trying to see how they can redesign those metrics to make them meaningful, because that was the big pushback that they got when they released this year. The next slide is really just the definition within the ESSA law around well-rounded education. The next slides are ones that we have talked through before, as well as the slides we've gone through. This is kind of our launching point in talking about how might we measure access and engagement in a well-rounded education at the elementary level? And then we categorize some areas that we might want to look at. One of the things that we've heard is also taking a look from our elementary schools as what percentage of their time is spent outside of MAP and ELA. So that's a question that we need to kind of gather some of that information back. And so we're starting to try and identify what are the points of data that we need to ask our LEAs to provide to us, because this is not data that we currently have. At the middle school, very similar approach, thinking about access and engagement, recognizing that at elementary and middle, you don't have the same distinct course separation that you have in high school. So it makes it much more challenging to develop a measure like this at elementary and middle than one that could be developed in high school, especially if you're looking to disaggregate it across student groups, because you don't necessarily have a different teacher or a different course on a student's schedule in elementary and middle in all of those areas. Oftentimes there's a lot of interdisciplinary instruction. There are teachers who are teaching multiple areas, and it's not as much of a clean break as you often see in high school. At the high school level, we started with the same principle, thinking about how do we look at access and engagement, and then we took a step further at looking at high school, and one of the things that you'll see is in this next work what we talked about was how do we also then look at equitable access, because in high schools when we have course data we're able to see what the enrollment is, what the participation is in different courses as well as programs, because it's not just all courses that take up and make up a well-rounded education, as we've heard from our LEAs and as you'll see in those charts as well. And then of course looking at that for our alternative schools, making sure that we are representing all of the different pathways that we could create with access to opportunities. So the current work on our development with this is we are currently engaging our LEAs and stakeholders, as I said before, so working with the ESSA task force as well as our LEAs and our STAR and our report card task force, working with them, doing some activities around what a design of a metric could look like, identifying what are the types of data we would need to collect, and then ultimately asking for that data so that we can test a model metric. So in working, in working with our LEAs, one of the things that we have found is that they are going to complete a survey regarding the availability of the data that we've outlined, as well as the impact of such a data collection, so that we have an idea of what that availability is, as well as what that burden is, and then be able to look at that data and do an overview of what's currently available in those different clusters. And that's really the way that, in talking with some of the other states, that's what they really started with, is getting a landscape of what does the availability look like from a cluster point of view. So be able to collect that data and look at a distribution of what are the types of programs according to those cluster areas. Then we'll need to collect additional data for the draft metric and be able to then do a pilot and an analysis of that data to take a look and see if the metric is actually doing what it is that we intended it to do. And then to the extent that it's practicable, the summary data would be able to be analyzed and reviewed to make any initial or future recommendations. We also brought this, broke it up into elementary and middle with our LEA task force, as well as high school and alternative school. And I added the next slide here with some feedback directly from our LEAs on what their engagement has been in trying to work on what this metric could look like. And some of the things that we heard is that they're excited to be able to look at the opportunities for students. They are concerned about the access to not just interdisciplinary courses, but to programs. There was a concern about that being an equity issue, and then being held accountable for something that they did not have full control over at this point. One of the things that they were very concerned about was being able to use this as a measure in the STAR system initially, because it's not something that we've routinely collected and that they had data about, and they would much rather use that as a lever on the report card to drive public awareness and have that conversation and then direct resources to those needs before it became an accountability metric for them. At the high school level, it obviously would be much easier to measure due to course level data. However, we would still need to do a course level matching and matrix, so that's something that we would have to get started on. And then there was a question as well about the equitable access. They thought looking at course enrollment, it might be a little bit easier to disaggregate that, but there was still some concern about that. So I captured that for you. And then we have a concept of a model that could be disaggregated and tested, but we would really need to flesh out a lot more of the business rules and the details of the data collection, and of course, the course catalog matrix. We also shared this with the ESSA task force and had feedback from them. I think one of the biggest comments that I heard from the ESSA task force was, this is really hard. And so, you know, I was glad to have the ESSA task force involved. There was a lot of conversation around how could we possibly collect this data and then measure it, and then make sure that we had some sort of auditing process. So that was a common conversation, that need for having course level data. There was a conversation during the ESSA task force about surveys, and there was also a pushback saying that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily be able to accurately answer a survey if you didn't know what was available, and the concern about that being an equity issue as well. But they thought that it would be something that was more aligned with the report card component, and then looking at that, how that might be able to be measurable. So our next steps in this work, we are going to continue to gather this feedback. We have 2 more meetings scheduled with our LEAs before April 30th to talk about how we could design a model metric and the types of data that we need to collect from them. We also have some data collection questions that are going out to them that we're asking them for, so that we'd be able to analyze that data over the summer. And then that would be our test pilot of that data with the LEAs and the schools that volunteer to let us use their data in an anonymous way to test on these model metrics. And then to the extent practical, after we're able to analyze that, we could possibly move forward to a full-scale pilot with the 1920 school year, and then bring a proposal for integration into the system following a successful pilot and analysis. And hopefully I've left enough time for questions.
That was like so amazing. It was 1 minute more than what I had planned. So that was really excellent. Okay, so guys, we have time for questions and discussion.
I have a couple. When you were talking about the information from the successful schools, it would help you to help the schools that weren't as successful.
Oh, during the All-Star tour?
Right. Is that, do you look at, I mean, the schools aren't the same. So the successful school could be successful because of the population of that school.
That's exactly what we looked at.
And then that information that makes that school successful won't help a school in another part of the city that doesn't replicate that school. You understand what I mean?
I do hear you.
I mean, do you understand what
I do understand, yes, sir. I think that, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read the report yet, but one of the things that you'll notice in looking at this report is the feedback and the way in which it was presented are the types of initiatives that these schools are bringing forward and that they're doing with their teachers. We're not saying that that program and certainly not a curriculum, but it's really thinking about some things such as, when I think about some like independent reading sessions, we think about how people have taken a look at utilizing student voice, how people have pulled together teachers for professional learning communities. Those are things that are replicable and that you can take away things from that. It might not be an exact cut and paste into a school, but when you take a look at practices that are happening, and I'll put my former school administrator hat on. When I would go around and I recognize that not every school would look like my school, and not every district would look like my district. But one of the things that I would look at is I would look and see what are they doing that they are attributing some of their success to, and what can I learn from that might be applicable in my school, or how can I adapt it? So we're still able to gather.
How does that information get from one of the schools that rates high to the school that doesn't?
So that's one of the things that this is the very first year, so one of the things that we tried to do with this tour was bring awareness to this, and we're certainly encouraging more collaboration and communication, but I think this is the starting point of having people talk about what's working, so we'd love to create more collaboration and communication out there.
That's what I'm trying to pull out of you, is the fact that collaboration,
Absolutely.
not just that you have schools, because all of the comprehensive high schools in the city, except for 2, were 1s, and the specialized high schools were 4, 5s, and 4s, and stuff like that, but they don't have the same population. It's not that it's apples and oranges.
I think there are strategies you can look
I
at
understand what
around
you're
that.
saying.
So that's really what we highlighted in this report.
One other question. What has been done to make sure that the schools this year report all of the data? Because last year's report card from Cardozo was, the data wasn't in the report card. It said Cardozo had no AP classes. Okay? And the answer I got was, well, they didn't report that. All right, well, that's not good enough. They have to report that. That's it has to be mandated that they report all the data, because it's embarrassing to the teachers. I'm sure I had retired the year before, but I've been teaching AP for 25 years, and according to the report card, we didn't even have any AP classes.
So thank you so much for that question, because I'm happy to answer what we did immediately following the release of the report card.
But it shouldn't be following the release of the report card.
Which is has a new idea for next week.
Okay, I understand.
Yes. So one of the things that you'll see is that in terms of the data points around the AP and IB participation, as well as the performance, were accurately represented on the report card. What we saw flaws with were the profile component, which was where schools needed to, and LEAs needed to go in and check the different school programs. And that started with an alignment with an existing process. And then what we recognize is that there may not have been the best communication between our LEAs and our schools around thinking about what this is going to look like, because it's going to look very different. It was the first time. So immediately when we recognized that there were gaps, we pushed out a fix to that was fixed in January. This year, what we've done is we've had constant communication with our LEAs. We've redesigned the input for that data system. We did that in January so that it would make it easier. We directly asked our LEAs to work with their school principals and their school leaders on a variety of things specific to the profile page. And this year, when we do our data validation, we are opening in May the opportunity for them to start updating their profile for next fall. Then we will close that in, I believe it is the middle of July. We will then go through and review all of that data and then push it back out to them and say, this is what you put between May and July. Is this accurate? And we're going to give them about a month to review that. And they're going to review just that information during that time so that they're not looking at other metrics that they're, and that's really what we saw. This was the first time we were doing it, and there was a lot of information for schools and LEAs to review. And they were focused on those metrics. Are my AP performance and my AP participation correct? And they weren't paying as much attention to the profile, and they were really looking at the performance metrics that went into their rating. So we've tried to create those processes that allow for greater input and an opportunity for cleaning that data and getting it back out to them before we ever start looking at the calculation metrics.
No, that's fabulous. The only problem I had before the report card ever came out was the school is labeled as a 1. And then it's got another year before it can be labeled as something else. And people will not send their children to that school because it's a 1.
And it's an annual
But
accountability
I really
system,
appreciate what you, because that's fabulous that y'all did that. Just,
Jessica, who's next, and Emily.
So thank you. One thing I will just add is it sounds like our rich education work might parallel with this in interesting ways. Like it might be interesting to sort of see the co-develop so that we don't replicate work that OSSE is trying to do in a metric that will be equivalent for all of our schools, but rather figure out how we can value add to this, whether there's qualitative data that doesn't make sense to use in an accountability system that nonetheless might be important to families, et cetera. So just wanted to highlight that. 2 questions for you. One is a purely fact-based question. You said it's a registered research study for mathematics. I don't know what that means.
What?
What is a registered research study? What is it referred to?
I know that it has an actual number, so it's registered with, I don't know if it's IES or it might be, I think it might be with IES, but I'll have to get the details. But they were very excited that it has a registration number and it is a approved research study. Obviously, it takes multiple years.
Got it.
I think what it is to summarize, is that it's a way of how it's very common if your research project has good results, you report it. If it has bad results, you don't. So we all get a skewed sense of what works. I think by registering it, it's a commitment that whether the results are good or bad, they become part of the pool. Does that sound?
Well, I know that it does have an affiliation with the Department of Ed in terms of which I believe is IES, but I will follow that up and make sure that's the right.
And then my second question sort of plays off what Dr. O'Leary was bringing up around the All-Star report. Are there opportunities whereby schools that are not featured in the report, that want to learn from schools in the report, can do so? Are there any forthcoming grants or other opportunities for showcasing that schools can come to and learn from? Or webinars or something?
So yeah, I mean, if you look at some of our grant programs, like our grant, particularly like restoring justice, have communities of practice. So this is us being able to utilize the resource. So I wanted to know how did you do this in school? How did you figure out to do it? So I can point you to our performance responses for the past all of the other practices on my pleasure. I'm not sure if we had any additional ones added for example, support tools or but that is but we do have a lot of applications.
Yep.
But it's not like stars.
Yeah.
But with online where you get more than that, we have to.
I would love to see some sort of, if there are opportunities for that. It would be of interest to me to see communities of practice around some of the high quality practices you're seeing. One of my clients that I get to work with is building communities of practice around network school improvement. And so when they bring together folks who are like really excellent at navigating district bureaucracy and have really good ideas on how to do that, and then someone else is quite excellent at facilitating change processes and helping teachers move mindsets. When you watch the conversations happen between the people doing the work, it's far better than I think any of us can sort of pontificate on or even hand reports to. Giving them opportunities to say, oh, I saw that there. I'd love to actually sit with you and talk with you, and having funding or webinars or opportunities for that to be facilitated would be something I think.
This is a place where someone that's a lot of council. This is a place where we have tried to more orienting folks. For example, I run an art thing. Every year we have a school district where we rent one school and just like templated some forms. The parents use those things and writing something on the page. They saw control cities and maybe more two forms than anybody else. You don't have to write start on the page.
Yep.
But little things like that, we try to highlight those types of efforts, but definitely we can do more work around pushing these efforts.
Thank you.
I have one question. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I had a question. Early on, you mentioned the survey that was conducted, and I was just curious who was surveyed and like which stakeholders were surveyed.
It was a web survey, so I don't know what stakeholders. It was open. We pushed it out. It was open for about 2 months and just closed March 31st. So
I thought I pushed that too.
yeah, so we pushed it out. We have a mailing list of several thousand people that engaged with us during the development of the report card, and used that, pushed it out to all of those groups that we had gone and given presentations to, shared it in any of those presentations that we did, any of the groups that we met with. I know we pushed it out to the SBOE task force multiple times, we sent it out to you guys. So we really tried to push it out as much as we could and get feedback. So as with any survey, it really is about who chooses to take it.
And I assume, I don't remember it, I think I filled it out too, and I assume and think I remember there's like a box for who you are, like in this ecosystem, right?
There was like an ecosystem type thing, so, and then we recognize a lot of people wear different hats, so, I think that's another thing to think about is that, sometimes people will take a survey with one of the hats they have on, they might go back and take the survey again, where with a different mindset, a different hat. But we did ask some optional questions to try and get an idea of the geographic distribution, where people resided in DC or if they didn't reside in DC. So that just closed on March 31st. I have not taken a look at the results since it closed.
And those would be made public.
Yeah, we will present a summary of those results.
Just one other quick follow-up, it's sort of related to Jessica's point about sort of the research we're doing, and we are also starting to think about, how to collect data from stakeholders in our respective wards, and sort of doing more targeted gathering research, like talking to principals, talking to new parents who are maybe navigating. So I guess I'm just curious if there's anything that, and you don't have to answer this now, but just thinking about what we can do in our specific roles to sort of add to the research that you're already collecting in different ways.
I'll be happy to follow up and kind of take some time to digest and think about what some of the value adds that you could certainly bring to that conversation.
I have a question also, which is also sort of following on Jessica's other point, which is we as a group are very interested in this idea of the social studies, science parts of the elementary level. Because we have a sense from just sort of our anecdotal talking that it's getting pushed out a lot. So we want to do different things to sort of understand whether it is, how it is, why it is, and how to sort of build up a conversation that gets into understanding how important it is. So with that, you were sort of talking about, Jessica mentioned this, that maybe you're going to do some surveying around that. What's your thought?
From the elementary, especially the elementary level, one of the things that we are going to be asking our LEAs is to provide the amount of programming or course opportunities that they have in those different cluster areas that have been identified for access to opportunities. We're also going to be asking and surveying information around the amount of time per week that is spent outside of math and ELA.
So this is like a question to a principal or a question to the head of an LEA?
It'll go to the head of the LEA and then they'll distribute it. That's how our communication works, is we work directly with the heads of the LEA and then they work within their ecosystems to get that information from them, and they submit it as an LEA to us based on each one of their schools.
Alright, so we should be in touch, because we're talking about doing some different kind of surveying as well around that. That would be more at the school level, more at the teacher principal level, and so there may be a way of somehow building on what each other are doing.
And really ours is the LEA level, because when we do data validation, it's the head of school from the LEA that has to certify that data. So that's where we push out our data request and then allow that LEA the autonomy to figure out how they want to collect that data and bring it back to us.
Right, I guess thinking of this as something that would go on the report card and even be used, how would that,
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So our health schools profiles do right now, it's just a technical problem is that we ask schools to fill that out, and they give us how your PD minutes and your health minutes. So this is to correspond with the health school back requirements, school activity requirements, right? And so measuring this input is difficult because I've been a teacher. Did my kid get 30 minutes outside today? Well, no, it rained, or maybe Matt ran a little bit late, or maybe we had a fire drill. And so we're not there like clocking every single day. But then you have maybe a set schedule. Like usually there's some systematic routine and then that adds up to this number. But then a lot of times, like, hey, what we get is, okay, you reported 75 minutes of PE time, and they're like, oh, that didn't happen. Because that's the schedule. So how do you figure out, like, this reported, what you're supposed to get versus the actual? It's like measuring that input is just really, really hard.
no, it is, and it's
And
also.
that's the challenge, right? Like, you're trying to figure out how to do that in an environment that's very dynamic.
And competitive. I mean, it's a little bit like the high school graduation number, which became part of the rating, and there's not really an audit system. So, I mean, I'm just interested, how do we know, how do we sort of get the numbers, have some sense that they're credible? Anyway, it's a conversation worth having, because we're very interested in this. And, how to get a good one. Anybody else on?
No, I think I want to talk to you, but I'll be in touch.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, that's great.
Both for taking, for
Thank you.
being so succinct and taking all our questions, and, you know, we just got one this morning, because we got one, but if you have extras, I think.
I brought one with me, but I will send more over.
All right.
I've got a follow-up shot, so you guys are gonna bring something.
And send it around, who wants to keep it?
Is it,
We'll get
it is electronic.
It is online.
It's,
It's an electronic. I do have some printed copies, and we'll make sure that they get sent over.
And let me just say for everybody here, that one of the things that the board is doing is we're just sort of revisiting our own school visit protocol, so to speak, and Ashley was part of that. And one of the things that we're gonna try to do, you know, every other visit or so with the school, is try to go to schools that have low star ratings, but high MGP, so we can really try to get a sense of, it speaks really to Fraser's question, if you're in a school where there's an enormous number of at-risk students, and is doing really well academically, given the growth score, what's going on? So that you do have sort of an apples to apples.
We absolutely did that in that report, so you do know some of those locations. And we dug into the actual student group of the MGP, or the growth to proficiency, or the attendance growth. And we really looked at the individual student groups. We even looked at overall student group scores. We looked at a variety of things that were unique to the, really the in the weeds of the disaggregation of the data, not just looking at the overall. There were some that we had some great overalls. There were anywhere from 2 to 5 stars were included in that group of 10.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So we're almost back to our roasting, but not. But let's go back to the working groups. Is there anyone who was part of social studies? We feel like we finished the social studies conversation. Do they have anything else they want to add to that?
That's across the grade level.
Yeah, so the one thing I will say about the social studies discussion is what two things. One, okay, there's opening these things up is a huge thing. I mean, there are hundreds of pages, and everybody has an opinion, and having, you know, when states have opened these up, you know, it can be a 2-3 year process. And so part of what we're looking at, as somebody said, I think, is we're starting to do sort of a landscape survey of how other states have done it. The other is to think about how to focus a conversation. And there were sort of 3 things that our group talked about really focusing on. One is sort of content in the early grades. The second is cultural relevance, which has been brought up a number of times in hearings, and we're looking at that. And the third is sort of democratic principles, human rights, etc., just making sure that people are, that's well represented. And that said, you know, it seems like whatever we do, people are going to get involved in, you know, they're going to raise what they're going to raise. But there is an idea of trying to really focus it so that we can have the most conversations, most research in those areas. The one other thing I want to say, okay, anything else on that?
I would just say that I raised in the meeting, and I think it's understandable that we want to be conscious of what happens when you open up standards to revision. But I don't necessarily think that I would phrase it as a bad thing, that a standards revisions process would take 2 to 3 years. I think that's reasonable.
Fair enough. I didn't mean to say that. Without it, planning, it needs to be well planned, and that's what we want to look in certain places. No, I totally do. And even in terms of the focus, I mean, the word focus is good. It doesn't mean that when you responsive, but that's not also, but to go with folks. The one other thing I want to raise, sidewise to this, is this morning, John Paul and I met at part of our regular monthly meeting, at OSSE, and we raised this issue of the social studies standards and what kind of interest there was on the OSSE side to engage in this. And I would say they're kind of where we are, which is it's kind of scary. It's a lot of work, and but also an understanding that they need to be done. They're old. So that's sort of the first step. And both organizations talked about trying to do this sort of landscape survey and sort of regroup really once the budgets are done, because both sides are very engaged in that, and try to revisit it, and at that point maybe be able to move forward. So we'll continue in our working group to start thinking, but we also want to regroup with them a bit. You're not going to be here for research?
I'll be right back.
Almost.
We have to let her go.
Really quickly, speaking of school tours, do we have a date set?
I think Lenita's working on a date
For what?
the first school
Next
tour.
school tour.
For April date.
Yeah, we're working on it.
The next school tour, monthly school tour.
It's challenging.
Oh,
April is always challenging because of testing
Testing.
and all of the breaks, but we're trying to get around the agenda and it works for the multiple visits.
Or can we do 2 in May? Or we in late May?
Okay, just whatever works.
It'd be great. Okay, let me just say on the research group, and I'll talk sort of slowly so that Jessica can get it. So that was Jessica, it was Emily, it was Zach, it was me, it was Marcus. Not Marcus. Okay. So the idea of this group is that we, never mind, no, okay. Is that it would have a couple of functions. One, as I said earlier, is it includes people who do research. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge Caitlin, because the school climate survey, that you all, the school climate memo, this incredibly rich collection of stuff about what's going on in the city and school climate, so that we will all be able to engage in a better way as that issue comes before us. Thank you very, very, very much. And I started it, and it's great. It's in our summer. And it's thick, that's how you know it. But it really has great appendices about what's going on. Okay. So the 3 parts of the roles of the research committee. One is, as I said, to be sort of eyes on a lot of the research that's going on, sort of offering advice, support to our research staff. And the research staff is pulling together a research advisory committee, so we'll work with that to sort of be a set of eyes on that, make sure we have different perspectives looking at these different projects. A second is, we're not going to have, I don't think, a separate committee on sort of reviewing ESSA, but that's a big thing, and the reason we don't want it to be totally separate is it's such an important thing for the whole group. But this will be a group that is part of it to work with people who know a lot about that, will sort of do some, keep a special set of eyes on those issues, I would say. And we're helpful in recommending some of the speakers that we're going to have. And then the third, which I want to, focus on for now, is the idea of a condition of education report, which would be sort of a, potentially an annual report, start small, might get bigger, might be modeled after some previous reports on NBC. But the idea would be to bring together in one place a bunch of key data indicators that speak to the condition of education in DC, and would include the kinds of stuff we were looking at. So if we did some surveys around teacher retention, around early education, or whatever, it would include that. It would be a way to sort of push that out. It might also include key data found in some other reports around that are being done around the city. It would be a way of sort of pulling people to think about the condition think about some of the special issues that we might focus on there, and over time it might, move in different directions. So that's that. Anybody from the committee want to add in?
Are we gonna talk about the second page?
What's on the second page?
High school growth.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Number 174 through 17.
Yeah, so
So the folks who are coming to speak next month, right?
Yeah,
Are we?
we kind of talked about that earlier. This was the bill you're talking about.
That's so, the March.
No, I just didn't know if you, if we're done, that's fine. I just didn't know, because we mentioned the panels, but we had a name.
Right, so, you're right, and I looked around, I thought we'd given it out, I couldn't find it, exactly right, and here they are. That is our panel, you're exactly right, that's, so here are the
Well,
names.
it's nice to be right here.
Yes. Well, you have a good record tonight, I can speak to everyone.
I don't know about the school.
I like school.
I really do.
I don't know, I don't know if it's not that, but
It's not. Yeah, no, that was a good idea. And by the way, that's something we can put in, like some facilities issues that over time, the idea would be to get some baseline data, to create some interest in looking how we're getting better, and you create some sort of interest in, getting better, so that.
Because that's a problem with everybody.
facilities?
Yes.
No, that's what we
The
have these,
Like the conditions.
we have these brand new schools that don't have problems. We also have these real old schools that do have.
And a lot of the brand new schools have problems.
Yeah, but the brand new schools have problems. That's a school problem.
Unless it's a foot of water on your school classroom.
Well, then
or every time
that's
there's a
different,
rainstorm.
that's different. I'm just saying that there were some brand new schools that have been, that haven't been kept up right.
Yeah, no, I was at a PTA meeting at the Abington Bowman School Monday, Tuesday night, and it was about 85 degrees in the library.
You know, we'll say
So,
that
85 if we can't protect it.
Roosevelt's got that problem already.
There's a lot of.
The interesting thing about Cadozo does. He was the custodian.
All right. Okay, I think we're moving to jump up.
Great. So thank you very much for acknowledging Caitlin's work earlier, and I want to also acknowledge Sarah, who's going to be talking about our call-out. But both have been working really, really hard this semester, and we're incredibly grateful for both of their work. You'll be seeing more of them in the coming months. They're fantastic. They're really great to have at meetings and in the office. So wanted to make sure that is public, but I'm going to actually turn it over to Sarah for information related to our call log. So you'll turn it over to you. And the clicker is right here.
That's right, I'm on this side of the table. Hi.
Can you
So,
introduce yourself? Please?
yes, I thought you just did. I'm Sarah Goldfisher. I am a fellow, which means to be paid intern for this semester. And I've really enjoyed my time so far and continue to, and it's been just great working with the staff and seeing everything in operation up close.
And I want to say Jessica and I ran into you on a school tour.
Yeah,
Friday.
that's right. So one of the things that the office has been doing is we started to keep track of who's been calling the school. And DCPS as well. Calling the office so we can get and then share with you a sense of the interaction that the office has had with the public as the face of the board, independent of the work that you're doing. So the question at the core of this is what public interactions have been happening through the State Board of Education office, particularly what do district residents ask for when they call the State Board of Education office. So so we started logging the calls. I say we, but it was last spring, about May of 2018 through the end of the school year, the calendar year. There was about a 6-month period, we're still reporting calls, but in that period,
we started logging the calls and documenting what we experienced when people call. So the report that I have for you today describes just the 6 months in the second half of 2018. So I have one interactive question to ask you. How many calls do you estimate were received by the office between June and December? You don't have to say a number out loud, but you can just kind of imagine that the 6 month period, right, after 26, 27 weeks or so.
726.
And if that was the actual number, I would recommend that you next time they have those jars of jelly beans there that you get. So it was 387. So I would say you might be statistically close, right? So that turns out to be about 60 calls a month or 15 calls a week, more or less. So when one calls the State Board of Education, you get into the phone menu tree, and it starts with, "Oh, thank you for calling the State Board of Education. Choice 1. If you would like to retrieve transcripts or get information about school records, press 1, and that takes you on to a recording. Option 2, if you would like to speak to a member of the State Board of Ed staff, well, who doesn't have the option to speak to a person? And the third option is if you are having problems or experiencing conflicts with your schools, and that sends one on to the ombudsman or the student advocate. So what we're going to talk about today is specifically option number 2, the calls that we actually get from the outside. So for those of you who like graphs, you will see here, I hope, and I think you have, if not printed, then you have digital version somewhere in your fielding materials. About a third of the calls are calls for transcripts or record requests.
So these are all the calls, including the ones that come to us and the ones that go to 23.
These are not the calls when somebody calls and say, "Can I talk to John Paul?" These are not those.
But no, my question is, option 1, I think, was if you had records or transcripts. So these are ones that went to the state board member and still, the state board staff, and they still want to talk to her. That's me, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I don't even know if there's a press 0. Actually, just what happens if the recording starts. Yeah, so there's not even a. Okay, so anyway, for those of you who like graphs, you can see that about a third of the calls were these requests having not taken option A. About a quarter of the calls were school complaints, and this group is actually an aggregate that we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. 19% miscellaneous. That could be 1 or 2 one-offs or something. Maybe somebody really just wanted the mayor. And the other one I just want to bring to your attention is 2% of the calls that we received were actually for State Board of Education matters. And well, wow is one. Sorry. Yes. Well, wow is one thing. The next thing is to know that those were specifically 6 calls.
So the good news is it means that everybody who's calling the state board knows exactly who they're calling.
Yeah. They all call it.
Why would they call here for a transfer?
They don't know where else to go.
And because, well, we answer the phones. One of the things that callers tell us regularly is they have been passed around from agency to agency, and we answer the phone.
They're just trying.
And so, this is, so it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? That we have these calls that are not necessarily related to our thing, to our issues. It really is a matter of people in the community know that they can call our number, and we'll try to get them to where they need to go, whether it's an IEP issue or
And I mean, some of these calls do come in for the Office of the Student Advocate or the Ombudsman, or people just want to call with an issue, and we pick up the phone.
Got a question too. I don't know anything but aggregate or whatever.
Grouping together.
But have you aggregated the data about the number of people that have called about specific school-related things? So what is the percentage of 3, whatever that number was, 376, that were those kinds of things?
That were about particular schools.
Yeah, just a
So,
percentage.
We don't ask which school if people don't share that information with us.
I'm just talking about
Yeah,
general, it had something to do with the school.
so it's always educate. 90% of the time, education
That's
related.
They're on the dartboard.
Right on the dartboard.
3% in council.
Maybe. So, the way that we've categorized stuff, I mean, about schools, is that you want to know particular schools, because often if it's a transcript request, it may be for schools that are still open and they just didn't know to go to school, etc. If it's schools that have closed, the issues are a little more complicated. We have a group of categories that are school
Right,
related.
now I see like 115 and 61, that's 176 of the phone calls have to do with schools.
Okay.
I'm not looking at the rest of them, but they have just that big, that's half the number almost. And that has to do with schools. So,
Sure.
The school complaints.
rather than State Board of Education things.
Yeah, a lot of people call because they need to talk to somebody and they just don't know who to talk to. We had, it's a little off of what I was planning to present, but one example of a call is we got a call from a woman who was frustrated, upset that she was having problems with her daughter's discipline decisions that were made at her private school. And this is the public school system, but it turns out she actually had a statewide state vouchers to go to the private school, so maybe there was an avenue for the ombudsman to help. I mean, the reason we remember this call so much is this woman and her daughter were so upset. 2 hours after the phone call, they showed up in the office. They were like, please help. So, and they went upstairs and they got.
Oh, that's great though. That's good. You're
Right,
on
so,
mark.
we are happy to be able to have enough bandwidth to field calls at the current volume. Yeah, so most of the calls that have come in have been categorized as teacher, staff, or policy problems. And some are about bullying or violent events. Yeah, we send those calls upstairs based on the nature of them, which can serve them better. Policy and credits and credit recovery, those are gray areas sometimes because they're pretty much tied together. But in total, there were 84 calls in that category. So what we do with the calls is where we send people and where the outcomes are. Just over half the calls were sent to DCPS or to OSSE. A quarter of them were sent up, we call it upstairs because their offices are on the 7th floor rather than the 5th floor where we are. And a few were referred online to the records portal. So for the second half of the year, last year, that's the only period covered by this. The asterisk is there because DCPS had instituted their online records portal in the middle of our data collection period of last year, so we started sending people online. So many of the calls that had been logged in May, June, July say, oh, we've sent those calls to DCPS, were probably records requests that we can now send people online and send specifically to the district.
DCPS changed its policy. You used to be able to call a number to help with a records request. You can't do that anymore. You have to go through the online records portal, and so we've changed our policy as well.
How do people know about this?
That's a fascinating question. Usually they call us and we let them.
I'm not being facetious. Because the same thing happened when OSSE was talking about how they changed the rules after the game was over. I think that's something they should publicize.
Yeah, I mean, certainly OSSE has done so for the report card parts of it. I believe DCPS put out something, but I don't know. But we've been pushing information certainly on the records requests as well. I mean, the way that you get records at least at DCPS or even in charter schools as well is you call the school first, right? Because they have that information. But so it's regular. It's usually only if the school is closed or if the graduate happened a long time ago, or if the school had a records issue where the records were fire or flooded or all those types of things, then you would need to go to the online portal. And so generally we start with the call. You call the school first. What's the issue? How can we help you?
I got a call today from somebody who wanted Ellington records from 1974. Yeah.
I mean, I run into students periodically that need a transcript when they're 50.
Yeah, and part of the struggle is, a lot of times when people do need their transcripts, it's for a job,
Yes.
or something, and they need them quickly. And the records portal does take time to do. And so that's one of the reasons that we recommend strongly that they go to the school first, because they can usually get them more quickly from a school than they can from the records request, which can take a couple weeks, which is problematic if someone is, they don't have a record to do a good job,
That's great.
So as I said, there were 6 calls that were for the board in particular. So I'm able to itemize what they are. The statistics are pretty clean. 2 of them were inquiries about running for the board. One
Was that back in the fall?
That was my fault.
Let's make your call twice. Yeah. One person called asking for meeting dates. Two calls were for particular people. One was a state board member, and another was looking for a former task member by name. And one asked to speak with somebody particular from office. Oh, office of student advocate. Sorry, student advocate's office. The slide order was moved around.
I thought you got the S.
So here are a couple of our responses to what we've seen in the data. We want to implement a standardized system for contact with the state board members. It's been so few calls through now, but that doesn't mean that will change. And we want to have a protocol in place for handling calls when they come in. And we also want you to know it's not like we've been absorbing them and hiding them. And the other thing is we'd like to
To talk to individual members?
Not often.
So I think if they go to the page, they'll get our email, and that's typically when we'll get those kind of queries.
No, I sent you.
No, I've got, I never got her email.
Maybe I'll apply.
exactly one of the things that we'd like to work on. So, what I was going to say, there was something else that doesn't need to happen. Yeah, no, I was going to talk about people who call in an angered flurry, as I said, just looking to need to reflect with somebody. We said, well, how about you just call your board?
Yeah, just have a call.
Just have all of them.
All of them, okay.
There you go.
Doctors.
They give me your time.
Doctors.
And the second thing is we want to update the phone menu a little bit more effectively, such that people who want transcripts to get that information without accessing us humans, although we're happy to tell them what the recording says, and maybe describe a little bit more about what the student advocate we have ombudsman can do for people when they call, if that's what they intend to do. So our takeaways for all of us, many people just don't know who we are. They don't, sorry?
We know that.
If you look at that first bullet and it's got 8,000 acronyms, that's probably why.
So that was intentional, but accurate. So, yes.
Sarah, so along those lines, in helping promote what it is you all do, that is part of what's in your package. And Jessica and Emily have packets for you guys. When you go out to schools, you see on the left side of the packet is our fact sheet, which has a bunch of information about what we are and what we're not. And on the back has contact information for all the board members. And on the right side are the flyers for the student rep app and student advisory committee. So those flyers are available for all of you at any time. Whatever you need packets, let me know, and we'll create those for you. We tried to kind of refine the information that people mistake us for, and make sure that we tell them what we do. What's that?
Packets.
No, you're saying we can like give out at meetings, right?
Yeah.
So they're in,
Oh,
so
So this is it, so before we talk a little bit about, board members going out to couple schools, and if you need more packets,
yeah.
those are printed off from the SBOE office.
I'll say too, I mean, one thing that's been kind of fun to do in Ward 6 is go out to PTA meetings when they invite me, and the first portion of my time is always, let me tell you about the SBOE and what we are and what we're not.
So this has all the, I can't see it tonight, I am sorry.
So the packet is created for you to drop off at one school to help promote.
The whole thing?
Yeah. But we can do that.
Yeah, and the second bullet point, so people don't know who we are individually and in the whole system, which I've learned so much more about. And the second thing is people need stuff, and they call us with all kinds of questions, and we are happy to field those questions and help people navigate if they find their way to us. And so please do help us think about preferred ways to help constituents reach state board members if they want to, and also increase the visibility and understanding of the board's role in the city, as Paul has promoted already in their folders.
Great.
Thank you. I just want to say, I think one thinking retreat and that one conversation wouldn't have to be a long one, but to talk about that, to look at the literature that we have, to look at it, I think individuals may have their own literature. I know I put something out at back to school and sort of look at what different people have and sort of see what makes sense.
So one of the other things too that hopefully by the time we're ready for the next presentation on the follow-up, so we do have a general email address as well. It's SBOE@dc.gov. We use it on a lot of our things, right? Because it's well, for me, it's a lot easier to say SBOE@dc.gov than it is to spell out my entire email address. It's too long. So we do get very similar emails to that as well. People asking questions, having problems, those types of things. As of now, I'm the only one that gets it. Paul gets it when I'm on vacation, but I'm the one that you're on vacation because I haven't shut it up yet. So generally those emails, I mean, they come to me and then I push them out based on whatever it is. I usually do so within 24 hours of receiving the email. It's almost always some sort of complaint that the ombudsman is best suited to handle, or a request for information that the student advocate is ready to handle. In certain cases, I do refer people to MPD if there's an issue that I feel like needs to be reported. But it's mostly the same types of things, and so I'm going to be asking the folks when we're working on the revised phone tree as well to look at how do we bring the email parts of it into it as well, so that you guys know about these types of things.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having this idea to do this, and thanks for doing it. It's interesting and useful.
Should we be reporting the amount of emails we receive that we are from parents? For instance, a large part of the emails I receive, I are farming out to other organizations because they're not work that we do. Whether it's the ombudsman or the student advocate, that's a large portion of the emails that I receive.
It's a good question. Let me get with Paul and with the other staff and try to figure out a way to make it an easy ask. It would be helpful in terms of our SBOE by the numbers.
Just tracking
just tracking of like how many emails do you guys get a day? How do you what are all parents?
Get a day.
Right? So for free, we both have access.
Oh yeah,
But it is interesting information, and it also is very helpful when we're talking to the council about the impact that we're actually having on our communities. This is how we're showing that impact. So it is important.
So you do want to feedback, because I do get a lot of emails from constituents about it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of an easy way.
You know, I'm trying to figure out a better way to ask us to.
But for now, I'm just not going to delete anything.
You delete those.
After a while.
I just want to recreate simple language to delete it.
What's the average amount of emails you're
Say,
I mean, we had those from community groups and stuff like that.
Okay.
Individual stuff.
I mean, I know, and we do, let's get to, new business and other discussion.
So I'm so new that I know I did this incorrectly, but I have some language, because last time I talked about the school climate resolution, and there was not clear agreement that folks felt like this is something we should pursue. So I did not ask the staff to review things, partially because I don't know that it's gonna proceed. But I did draft and brought copies for everybody, and would love to take a couple minutes just to share this with you.
So what do you want?
I don't know. I feel like there's no numbers on the side of it. Perhaps staff is supposed to be involved in helping draft it. I don't know. So this is what you got. Take a look. See what you think. What I would propose is that if folks have an interest in moving forward with it, that between now and the April meeting, we would work together over email to iterate on the text, and then I would share it with the staff to make sure it's all properly formatted, properly worded, and properly presented for a vote.
This is about climate change.
This is the climate change resolution. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I thought you know about the climate school climate.
No, this was at last month's working session. I raised the fact that we've been, and both Emily and I think Marcus as well, have been contacted by folks who are trying to increase the number of educational bodies that are involved in passing resolutions in support of a recognition of the fact that climate change is going to affect our children. It's therefore an issue that deals with poverty and equity, and so it's something that they're hoping more boards of education get involved in. Right now, the boards that have passed such resolutions are largely local boards of education. They are not state boards, but the Fairfax County Board of Education has passed this climate change resolution with similar language, obviously with aspects that are more applicable to them. So they talk about like their own investment in renewable energy sources for schools, about the way that they use their purchasing power to make environmentally conscious decisions, not things that apply to us. So the places I pulled it out, I talked about why it's an issue for children, why it's an issue for equity and justice, the fact that we passed the next generation, we adopted the next generation science standards, which have key components in all of the grade levels about human interaction and human impact on the environment. I talked about our partners within DC who are responsible for actually enacting laws and policies that can do these things, including the council, which enacted the Clean Energy DC Omnibus Amendment Act of 2018, which actually just became law on March 22nd, and basically left it with what we're asking is to encourage the LEAs in the city and other student organizations to engage in advocacy, addressing causes of climate change and reducing the impact of climate change on children and families in DC. So,
Nice.
that's my suggestion.
Can I make a suggestion from now on, whether this is this or anything else, that we come and pass it around via email so people can take a look at it? So it's, especially if it's going to be something that is going to be on potentially at a board meeting for the coming in 2 weeks, okay?
I'm certainly happy to. It was
I know it's not just you, I'm saying it for everyone, because now we're going to have, new business is supposed to be 15 minutes, and it's probably going to take, several more.
Well, I think this is probably the next thing on the new business as well.
And my hope, and again, first time doing this, so
No,
happy to learn and do
I
different
don't mean it, I mean it from everyone, for moving forward, this could have been an actual issue that is put on the
It is on the agenda. Like, it is physically on the agenda on Simply, there's posted, it says Sutter Climate Change Resolution.
When, where?
On Simply on our web. I checked earlier today to make sure it was there.
It was not the other day.
So, okay, so I'm just gonna say, so one thing is we can put it on this so that people know.
Sure. It was at 4
Let
o'clock.
me just say,
If
we don't have
you're
our processes
not
on this, so I'm
when
going to take this to just where it says just.
So I am giving this to the board for the first time 5 minutes ago. But it is listed on our Simply
Right.
as an item under new business. It says Sutter Climate Change.
Yes, but, okay, so John Paul sent that out last week, and
It was
is there
there.
updates?
It's listed as one of the agenda items.
Under
But what I'm saying, actually, in the future, we'll try to,
Text was-
we'll try to have.
The text was not.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And in full disclosure, the text was written at 3 o'clock this afternoon, because that's simply the reality of what's on the board with a full-time job.
I'm saying this for everyone, and that's one of the reasons why when I texted out today, when we have long meetings like this, that we make sure that we're able to flesh out ideas ahead of time, that we're looking at things before we come to the meeting. So we're coming to the meeting prepared. That's all I'm asking for moving forward. I'm not saying for you, for anyone, just as general point of making sure that things are running, not running longer, especially when they're going for 3 hours.
Okay, did anybody else want to talk on this?
Is this something we will have another time to talk about, or is this?
Well, so let me just say some process things and jump how you can get in on this. So, because it was brought up here, in theory, it could come to the next meeting on the dais, at which time we could introduce it, debate it, and pass it or not pass it. Or we might say for that we do want a chance to talk about it more here and pass on the chance of putting it up at the next board meeting, do it at the next working meeting, and then take it up. Those are all options, I say, because I know it's not necessarily imminent.
No, but to be fair, I brought it up at the last working session in March,
Right.
and then said I would bring text to the next working session.
Yeah, not, like I said, yeah, I'm just curious, because it is 8 o'clock, and I need to go. So, and I do want to talk about this, so I'm just wondering if there is a space where we.
Well, I mean, the other way is to do as we've done some other things, which is to do it by email, that you guys can go back and forth, other people can go back and forth, and based on that, you can decide whether or not we're bringing it
Also,
in.
there are 3 members that aren't here.
Yeah. And Zach, I gave a copy to Zachary. I did not know that Marcus was leaving, but I'll make sure that I give a copy to Marcus, and I will re-engage the board via email to find out whether this is appropriate to bring in April, or if
But
it needs to.
I think that what Jessica said though was, as far as our editing something on email, there wouldn't be a problem with bringing it to a vote.
That's correct.
I think the question if folks have concerns about the substantive value of putting forth such a resolution. I know that Ashley had raised that concern in March when I raised it at the working session.
That's right.
So.
And I want to raise it in a different way, which I also raised before, which is I worry about if we have so little time to get this, whether it's at the working meetings or whether it's on the dais, and if we start to talk about things that are far afield from education policy, that we could have multiples of these each time in a working meeting on the dais. So I worry about it a lot. That's sort of all I'll say about it. I would rather see this come off something as, let's make sure that when we do our science standards, to make sure that it's in the science standards. So it's not that it's not important.
But it's in the science standards, so there's no need for us to check that it's.
No, I know. So anyway, so I'm raising a concern about how we want to use our time. So I'm just going to raise that again. And put that out there. And anybody else want to talk substantively on it or any other? Because this is supposed to be the time for talking about it.
If something is already in the science standards, then where they're introduced to content about this, and we are looking at policy, education from a policy perspective, why would this be necessary?
Sure. So I think a couple things. I think one, we've recognized other organizations and other issues in similar fashion. To me, climate change and its impact on our city students, specifically our low-income students, is exceptionally important, right? We are elected officials who get to raise issues of importance to our city and to our students. Second, we live in a city where climate change is going to have disparate impact on different parts of the city and different student populations in the city. Students who are living close to rivers are going to have disparate impacts. Students who are already living in public housing where the conditions are poor are going to continue to suffer from more asthma attacks as climate change and air quality worsens, and all of that worsens with issues of climate change. So I do think this has education value. I do think it matters for us as elected leaders who are representatives of education to highlight the impact this is going to have on students. And in a city where we're striving for 100% clean energy, where we're striving for all sorts of environmentally favorable policies, I think it makes sense for it to be connected to our schools and our children as well.
What is it proposing exactly? Sorry, is it proposing that we pass a resolution or that we
That's right.
take action in some way? Or
Well,
that other
if anyone has a suggestion on how we could take action, I'd be happy to hear it. I don't see a way for our
So
board
it's just it's a statement.
to do so other than to say it's an issue of importance.
We recognize.
Yeah. What about if we recognize that it's in the standards and
That's what it says. That's,
you know,
that's
but
what the law
as
says.
the now that therefore be it resolved that we recognize that we recognize and acknowledge that these ideas are the standards and we hope schools take them seriously, that the city is a lead, you know, however you want to say it. So it's
I mean, I'm happy to do that, but I will say, Ruth, I think and again, first time at this, so if it's wrong and this is not our resolution should be presented, I wouldn't want to have it be resolved that something that was in the standards and that we want them to pay attention to it because they are required to follow the state standards passed and adopted by the board, right? So that would seem sort of an odd thing to resolve.
what have other, you were saying you were looking at what other boards have done.
This is modeled on this template language from 3 or 4. From 3 or 4 other boards. The difference is we don't have purchase power. A lot of those boards focused on policies they had passed about purchases and the way that school dollars were spent on solar power, on solar energy, on resources that were used. They focused on their partners in various levels of government within their jurisdictions, so local, state, and federal. But otherwise, this is the very similar text of most of the left bills.
So was it school boards or boards of ed, and they had authority over this?
They were all local school boards to date. The state of California State Board is considering a resolution as well, using the same sample template language that was provided to me.
So would it be potentially appropriate to add an additional resolve clause encouraging the state board itself? Yeah, I mean, we do have some purchasing authority that we do purchases for ourselves. I mean, it isn't much, but at least reviewing what our procedures are to encourage economically sustainable purchasing.
Could be. I mean, I'm happy to take that and throw that in there and figure out how to do that. I think the other thing is we do have all new school construction in the district. They are required to pursue certification. So like it is already a piece of what our LEAs do. The difference, of course, is that our LEAs do that. We don't have any. This is exactly why I'm pointing it out, Ashley, because I know this is something that matters to you. So I was careful to omit that kind of language from this.
I'm just concerned that, again, with these resolutions, we're overstepping the bounds of our authority. We are a board of ed that deals with policy issues, we spend a lot of our time talking about, budgets and DGS issues, when those are not the types of issues that we oversee. And when we're looking at this, again, it's an issue that we're spending time focusing on, that we have no authority over. And like Ruth, I think we should be spending our time looking at resolutions, looking at policy issues, ways where we can make a concerted effort. By saying, oh, well, we want LEAs to talk about this issue, that's great. That's wonderful, but why do we need to say this as a resolution?
Because we're the only elected representatives that focus on education.
Can't do that though.
The council has. They've passed a bill on clean energy to reduce the impacts of climate change for the children in our state.
It's not just children, it's all residents.
Of course it is, but the children will be
But some of the stuff though that you're saying is just overly broad, and doesn't actually,
So if you have suggestions for language, great. If you are telling me that you won't support such a proposal,
I
that's
don't,
fine.
at this time, I will not.
Okay, but why, we don't need, I think we're wasting time.
Yeah, I just wanna say one thing, which is, we have authority to do what we decide to do. Our statutory language is that we can advise, so we can advise on this. That's our majority vote gets to decide on that, I just wanna say that. I do think, is we need to think as a board where we wanna put our energy. And I have a question for Jessica, which is, you talked about the other resolutions that were like this, which I assume is that those two, the transparency.
Mental health.
So I just wanna hear, because I think of those as really about ed policy, sort of policies in the city, and different from this, so I wanna hear from you how you see them as in the same category. Because I do think we have to make somewhere, whether it's me or all of us, we need a categorical.
Yep, right. I understand. I think in the same way, the state board has no authority over mental health funding, mental health programming, with the exception of passing health standards, which categorize health as behavioral, mental, and physical health. So in a similar way, it is related to a topic over which we have a narrow slice of jurisdiction, health standards, but something we know matters greatly to the success and livelihood of the children in our care, right? The children in our city's care. Similarly for budget transparency, we have no say over budgets. We have no impact on budgets, except that of our own advocacy, whether on behalf of our constituents or as a body saying education budgets need to serve the needs of children in the city. But the aspects of budget transparency, of what that resolution talked about, having comparable information to make it easy for residents to understand how budgets were working, again, totally outside of our purview and outside of our jurisdiction. At a personal level, I went and advocated today at the DC Public Charter School Board's budget oversight hearing on behalf of budget transparency. I submitted testimony for DCPS as an individual member. So that certainly was in my purview. Our resolution would seem to say we don't really have any say over that whatsoever. Like there's no standards that we're referring to. There's nothing over which we have jurisdiction. So in the same way, this is meant to highlight something that I think deserves attention, that I think deserves attention on behalf of our students, and matters as a public health issue, if you will, for the city as a whole, including students and schools. But again, if this is not a resolution that has support from the board, certainly, I won't advance.
I guess my only thing that I'm grappling with is that all of those things you mentioned, I sort of understand what we're advocating for. Like, we want to move in any direction, or we've heard from our constituents this is a problem, and therefore, here are some suggestions. With this, and again, I can't see what it says, but with this, I'm just trying to figure out beyond, like, what Bruce was saying about, we want students to be working on this in schools. I don't know what we're asking for or advocating for. So is it just symbolic? Is it just to take a stance so that?
At the moment, that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
It is symbolic and taking a stance on the importance of this and the importance of this issue to the students and families of our city.
I'm going to leave, and I will just before I leave, I'll say I would vote for that just because I think it's important. But I also don't feel as strongly about it as I do about thinking about how we actually make this something that has teeth or
I'm trying to open to suggestions within the narrow slice of I won't put in something that I think we should do that is strongly outside our purview, something that we have no ability to do. And so if anyone's got a suggestion for me, I'm totally open to it.
My thought is just that maybe we don't need to do a resolution at all, but that we do, think about this in our rich curriculum or whatever we're calling it, and in our social studies and you know what I mean? That it's more something that we're discussing as part of the.
Right. I think the point of this and the reason I wanted to bring it to the board is that I do think that having elected officials say that a thing matters to them and to the body that they're part of is very different than elected officials talking about a thing in a meeting.
Right.
So it's okay if that is not going to pass, and I will drop the action. But I do think it is important to recognize the difference between us talking about things amongst ourselves and us passing a resolution that will be recorded for posterity in official capacity as saying
I agree,
matters.
and I will say that the thing that differs here again for me is
that. With all those other things you mentioned, I've heard from constituents about that. With this, I have not. And it's not, I haven't asked. I think if we start asking, we would hear something, maybe. But it's slightly outside. You know what I mean? It's slightly different. And
I disagree, but it's fine.
Have you heard from constituents?
I have.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, okay, so I would just say people hear, you know, we have different constituencies, we hear different things, and that's part of what the vote is about, right? Whether we think this is the kind of thing broadly, this particular issue, whatever, to go on. So you'll hold people, talk to people, sort of figure out whether you got enough to move it, and then we'll either see it on the dais next time after that, or not, and then decide specifically.
Great. Thank you, Jessica.
All right, anything else under new business? Okay, why new business, if anybody wants to buy their bus for coffee? Oh, okay, here we go. Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?